The only thing that's irritating me now is that when you guys talk, you get the green outline because you're sharing a camera, and I don't. I mean, it's hard to relate to somebody like me, I know. Let me see if I can turn that off. Don't look like it. Rules. I don't see a way to turn that off. I could just ignore it, but I'm not sure. I've got it in me. All right, Majid. All right, we got a good connection going. The noise, I mean, you can't hear my dryer, can you? Because I've got pulse effects on right now, and I'm just using the noise reduction, and it seems, yeah. Yeah, that's actually, I can tell it's really sensitive. Like it's the second you start talking it, or even faster than that. Yeah, that's pretty good. Oh well. When it comes to, because it actually looks right on the YouTube. So I'm looking at it right now. It looks good. It looks good enough to use. I'd rather use a video, but people have problems with it for right now. Not really, no. Really, the only one that's important is this one on OBS right here. And that's if it's, we're assuming it's important to the people that watch. Oh, it's capturing my cursor. Okay, let's turn that off. Capture cursor. Hang on a minute. What the heck is going on here? Yeah, because the screen. There. somebody's covering up the size of their pupils. Oh, we are going to mess with you so hard. I think I was worried about the last episode, but it turned out to be okay, I suppose. Hey, the show must go on, as they say. Oh, okay, great. Majid's not coming through at all. Oh, it's OBS. Hang on. That's why I... Also, Majid is muted. That's lovely. Properties, default.
Eric is also on all the drugs, but he handles it better.
Okay, that's good.
I'm showing audio working on the meter, but yet I can hear everybody just fine. Say something.
Any particular reason we're using Discord today?
Trying to be agreeable to everybody who hates video.
There's only one person in these.
I was going to say there's only one person that really has a problem.
And I had forgotten he said he wasn't going to be here. Londoner's typing right now. Let's see if it
would it make your life easier if we just switch over there?
No, we're fine now. We're already streaming. He said it fixed it. All I did was switch it away from default and then back to default on the audio on the desktop audio. What in what in the world?
Linux has jank. More.
No, that happens on Windows too.
Okay, fine. So it's Audacity then.
It's OBS.
It's OBS.
OBS.
It's OBS.
So
okay, so computers. We need to figure out who's running the numbers. We need to figure out who's hosting.
I'm fine hosting since I haven't.
I'm okay with that.
I think that's a good idea. Love to hear Eric's dulcet tones as much as possible.
I don't recall the last time Eric hosted. It must have been a while.
Been considering. I mean, it's been probably 3 recordings ago or 2 recordings ago. Yeah, probably 3.
Yeah.
So technically, like 4 shows, 5 shows.
Right.
4 shows. Well, actually, no, 5 because you guys released that one with Majid and Joe just as a single, like 5-hour episode.
No, yeah, it's amazing how just the 2 of us still managed to go on for almost 3 hours.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, we both could essentially talk for our respective countries, so...
Yeah, very true. Very true.
I mean, I think any time it's ever been just 2 of us and we had any concerns, that's why I don't even think about it anymore. Whenever we've had concerns, it wouldn't be long enough. It always was, if not longer. So, especially if there's anything, that involves an opinion or any contentious topic or whatsoever, people always seem to have a lot to say about it. So, well, I'm ready to go if you guys are.
Yeah, very true. Okay.
All right, you guys want me to run the numbers?
Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, how's my sound coming across? Because I'm looking at Audacity and I'm like pegging
everybody sounds
the top
good.
end. I'm still going to turn mine down. It is
audio.
just
Audio.
check.
Audio. Check.
Check 1. Check 2.
Okay, yeah, it was getting up to like 0 dB and redlining, so this is a little bit better. All right. Everybody got Audacity up and running?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, record. Oh, I'm glad I did that after somebody started the laundry.
You got laundry running at your house?
Evidently.
I've got a dryer running, but Pulse Effects seems to be drowning it out.
Yeah, I can't hear it.
Okay, so 3, 2, 1, 0.
0.
0.
It's all yours, Eric,
loneliest
whenever you're ready.
All right. Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 435. This is episode 435.5, recorded on Sunday, April 14th, 2024.
Emulating everything, I'm Joe.
A fanboy for Game Boy, I'm Bill.
Rocking out, I'm Majid.
And back to normal, whatever that is, I'm Eric. First up in the news, Mint Monthly News. Mint is testing a new CDN setup for repositories. EndeavourOS ends ARM branch due to lack of help. Proton buys standard notes. Dynabolic Portable Linux renewed after 10-year hiatus. apt 2.9 released. 3.0 announced. In security and privacy, over 92,000 D-Link NAS devices exposed via backdoor with no patch. Out of service. Then, in our wonderings, Bill gets his game on with a new handheld device. Joe gets his game on with every device. Majid gets to be the family IT guy, and I deal with some technical debt. In our innards section, we talk about migrating Pi-hole and WireGuard to an x86-64 system. In vibrations from the ether, we have listener feedback about malicious Linux developer vulnerabilities, which relates to that XZ or XY vulnerability that we've experienced lately.
XZ.
And finally, XZ. Okay, well, Z, but I'll give you that
Z.
pass.
You mean Z, right?
I think
Z?
that's what he meant.
Yeah,
it's
that's
okay.
what he meant.
And
Was
finally,
there a second vulnerability that was XZ?
I think it's almost exactly the same as XZ, but except it's fancier and sounds better.
Exactly. And finally, and check this out, Bill discusses Full Up, the comprehensive update script for Arch Linux-based systems. So let's start with the news. We're asking you for help, because most of our news comes from what is posted by our listeners to our Discord news channel. So if you're aware of a news item that you would like us to cover, please let us know. We'd be happy to talk about it. Up first, Mint Monthly News for March 2024. This is from the Linux Mint blog via Londoner. Posted just too late, April 1st, for our last show, Clem talks about upcoming changes and features for Mint 22. Linux Mint 22 installations will be better localized and use less disk space than before. Pre-installed packages for languages other than English, and the one you select will be removed at the end of installation, saving a significant amount of disk space post-installation. I wonder if that includes all of those fonts, like the 100 variants of Noto and stuff like that. That would be nice. The Software Sources tool will feature support for the new Deb 822 format. The default sound server in Linux Mint 22 will be Pipewire. The next version of Pix will support JXL images. Mint 22 will ship with the 6.8 kernel. A new thumbnailer for GIMP files was implemented. With GNOME 46, GNOME Online Accounts moves to GTK4. It can no longer be used by GTK3 applications. To solve this problem, a new X app called GNOME Online Account GTK was created. As with any X app, the goal is to work for everybody in any desktop environment in any Linux distribution. This will provide GNOME Online accounts to any desktop that didn't have access to it before. For instance, Mate and XFC editions in Linux Mint. Both GTK3 and GTK4 versions will be available. Because in Ubuntu 24.04, the Thunderbird has moved to a snap, the Mint devs decided to package it themselves. So it will continue to be available as a native deb package. Work continues on the chat room application Jargonaut. It received a new layout, a tray icon, image thumbnails, channel events, Nix serve authentication, text formatting, /me commands, scrolling catch-up support, auto-completion, spell check, and so on. And for those that don't know, Jargonaut is the replacement for HexChat for IRC chat. The package repositories were tuned last month to accept a larger number of concurrent connections. Although this helped address some of the issues we had, they're still really slow when the traffic is high. Mint is currently working on a new partnership with Fastly, which has the potential to significantly and consistently increase the speed of the repositories. The popularity of the Linux Mint editions was recently measured. From a population sample of over just 5,000 users, the following was found. Mint Cinnamon had 42.7%, excluding the Edge version. Mint XFCE had 20.5%. Mint Mate had 13%. Mint Edge had 12.6%. LMDE had 11.2%. And lastly, advertising on the Mint websites was drastically reduced. And then I'm going to include the follow-up short blurb, and then we can discuss any of this if it's interesting to do so. Mint's testing the new CDN, as I mentioned, with Fastly. In a blog post and in the Mint forums, Clem has put out a request for users to test a new setup for the package repositories using a CDN, which is Content Delivery Network. And this service is from Fastly, as I mentioned. There is a link to the Linux Mint page on GitHub where full details on how to make the change are described. This has the potential for much faster download speeds with multiple points of presence across the globe. And I've already switched to that, and it did seem to work pretty well. I got full speed download as I was using it. So, was there anything in that post that you wanted to talk about, the breakdown of the desktops or anything like that? I mean, it's pretty much what I expect.
I mean, I'm surprisingly excited for this. We know that Mint is a traditional distro, desktop paradigm, all that sort of stuff. But in one sense, it's the first proper new release for 2 years because they're based on the LTS. Ubuntu's, and 24.04 is coming out this year, and all the previous ones have been based on 22.04. And so I'm actually quite excited for some of the changes that they're going to make. It'll be interesting to see how that GNOME online account app will work.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting because it really only hooks into a few applications right now. Like for the email, for example, like that's a really easy way to configure email clients because you put in your details for the online account, and if you have either Evolution or Geary installed, you open it and there your email's right there. You open Calendar, your calendar's right there. But it doesn't integrate with Thunderbird or other email clients or other calendars. So I'm wondering if part of this is also integration with other apps as well. That would be neat.
True. The other question is, the other comment I was going to say is, I find it interesting that they're going to package Thunderbird themselves and have it as a deb package because I would have thought maybe just using the Flatpak would have been easier.
I think the problem with that is the Flatpak is outside of their control, and what they generally tend to do is they want to give people a complete package that's within their purview. And so, just like with Firefox, whenever they made the switch to
And
Snap
Chromium.
and they created a deb, Chromium, exactly. So, for better, for worse, for political reasons, whatever it is, Clem and Mint have just decided they do not want to use snaps. And so this is what they then have to deal with if they want to take that stance.
Is anybody else surprised how much more popular the Cinnamon desktop is than anything? I mean, I would have guessed it was.
No,
but
not surprised at all.
I'm not surprised at all that Cinnamon's the most
but it's twice
popular.
what the next one down is.
No, but what I am surprised is that XFCE is more than Mate. That I thought was interesting.
And again, almost twice the popularity.
Yeah.
But with Cinnamon, it's it's the one that's at the top of the list. So if someone's going in to try out Mint, or they want to know what Mint is, they're going for Cinnamon first. I mean,
yeah, and plus, as we've talked about before, Cinnamon is much lighter on resources than say something like GNOME or, well, in the past KDE, probably not so much now, but in the past anyway.
It's not as light as XFCE or Mate though.
No, exactly. But my point is that it's light enough that you don't need to worry about how heavy it is if you've got a slightly, maybe an older machine. And if you have a real older machine, then you're going to go for XFCE because that's the lightest of the three. So I suppose actually when I think about it, I can see why Mate, because I don't understand what the draw for Mate would then be. It's not as light as XFCE, but it's not as full featured as Cinnamon, which isn't that much heavier anyway. So
well,
why
it is
would
based
it's
on
like
newer technologies, though. It is leveraging the GTK3 and I don't know. Are they on the GTK4 yet?
I don't think they are,
but they're.
I don't think so.
I think they're a little.
I
bit
do actually know they
game.
have done. They have done some GTK
and Wayland and all that stuff too. There's chatter about that.
But just keep in mind too. Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just gonna say, and then I'm done with it. But I would say of the distros, if you think about it, of the distros that offer an XFCE version, I would say Mint. Mint is probably one of the best stewards of that desktop. They offer an attractive and functional way of using it. So does distros like Manjaro, and I suppose even to a lesser degree Ubuntu. Don't hate me. But I mean, Ubuntu, that's the one you would expect. But honestly, it looks the same as it did 15 years ago, where you load up XFCE on Mint and.
But that's the draw, isn't it? But that's the draw. That's what it's for people who want.
Sure, but you can make XFCE look modern with the right theming and using the right settings and things like that.
True, you're right. I mean, you would think a canonical official flavor would be a little bit more daring.
They must think that they've got the metrics saying that that's what people want. That the reason they're using Ubuntu is they don't like change, and I suppose there might be some truth in that. I don't know. But
because
the numbers
the
are
interesting thing. The other interesting thing about this is if you think that Mint Mate has only a little bit more market share, market share, I suppose, than LMDE, which makes you think that, well, there's a lot more people using LMDE than you probably would have thought. But I'm not surprised about Cinnamon being that popular. I'm not surprised by that at all.
They all speak to different audiences, though. LMDE is its own separate thing, and I think that's really purists who don't want to deal with Ubuntu, who really like that it's a Debian-based, distribution, but it's still mainstream enough that it's supported and, is a better experience than just vanilla Debian. Mate is still for people who like GNOME too. Because you can still have that classic layout, or you can pick the other layouts the layout chooser that you get. So That's what's interesting is that, of course you expect, I of course expect Cinnamon to be the lion's share simply because, like Joe said, it's the first one, it's the default.
The flagship.
But
Yeah,
even
an
looking at
XFC.
this, you're looking at like 65% cinnamon usage. I mean, between Mint Cinnamon, Mint Edge, and LMDE, those are all probably cinnamon. Now, some people might have gone in and put something else on Edge if they wanted to, but that's still like 65%.
Yeah, that's true. I
That's
didn't
a
even
fair
think of
point.
that. You got to add those together. And
Yeah,
you're getting
exactly.
Right.
A slight controversial hot take. GNOME 2 went away over a decade ago, right? I mean, we're talking what, was it
15
2011?
years?
more than a decade.
Yeah, maybe even longer. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's almost 15 years. 2011, maybe something like that. Is there anybody out there who still wants that kind of paradigm? I can understand.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And they're vocal about
Just
it.
just like Bill said about Ubuntu, like the reason it still looks like that, the maintainer of Ubuntu is one of the chief developers on XFCE, and they ship it that way because that's what a lot of people want it to look like.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's easy enough to change it, and that's fine, but I mean, there's a reason that it's very staunchly traditional for that, because of that audience.
Okay. And then just one as a question because of my own ignorance. I've never really understood X apps. I just thought X apps were just Mint apps. Have I misunderstood? Because when they put about how with any X app the goal is for it to work for everybody in any distributed environment and in any Linux distribution.
Yeah.
They're just
can
very,
someone educate me on that one?
Yeah, they're simple, lightweight, but functional utility applications. Xed, which is their editor, and they have an image viewer. They have a document viewer. Yeah, exactly. They just have a small suite of applications that work pretty well on just about any desktop and are, super fast, lightweight, and not overdone with options. So
they're in the AUR.
The portability.
They're
Yeah,
you can get them from GitHub and all that too. So
yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, that's just kind of their name for their little suite of applications that they add to all their desktops. The stuff that's made by Mint developers. X apps. It seemed to make more sense years ago, but now it kind of feels like an adequated way of naming something. But I suppose maybe that it'll seem more like Mint's thing now. That
I think it's also just the break that they made from GNOME when they, forked Cinnamon, and they're not using GNOME's equivalent apps like gedit. And
yeah,
I mean, heck, even GNOME's moved on to a different editor from gedit and their different terminal. Like they've changed apps, since then. So I think this was their way of just having their own set of those basic apps. But anyway, what do you say, Joe?
I say, Endeavor's OS devs say goodbye to their ARM branch. Maintainers needed. This is from 9 to 5 Linux. Founder and project leader of Endeavor OS, Brian published today a short blog post announcing the end of the road of the distribution's ARM branch due to a lack of recent upstream changes in maintainers. And sorry, I was going to butcher that name no matter what I did.
Can any of us say that right? Majid?
Powerwote Mojo? Powerwote
I would guess that's Perwote.
Perwote Mordor. I have no idea.
Mordor.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
We apologize to you.
I am so sorry about butchering that name, but yeah.
You're welcome to come on the show and
Perwote
talk about
Mojo
it.
would be my guess. Yeah. I know him. I've talked to him and worked with him. I helped him with their website and stuff early on.
So you should know then.
Brian P, baby. Brian P. That's it.
That's what we should have.
The Endeavor OS ARM branch was initially launched about 3.5 years ago, and it shipped its first installer with the Endeavor OS Artemis release, allowing users to easily install the Arch Linux-based distro on various ARM-powered single-board computers like the Raspberry Pi or Odroid N2XU4. EndeavourOS ARM was based on the Arch Linux ARM project and maintained by a few members of the EndeavourOS community. Compared to the upstream, EndeavourOS ARM offered a graphical installation method by using the popular Calamaris Universal Installer for Linux-based systems. Unfortunately, it looks like the upstream Arch Linux ARM project is quite behind compared to the Arch Linux project. And recently, the gap between the ARM and 64-bit architectures became bigger. This, combined with the frustration of the lead maintainer as he didn't receive more help from the outside, led to the EndeavourOS ARM branch being abandoned. EndeavourOS is a project on the side for everyone involved, and enthusiasm is key to making it roll forward, said EndeavourOS leader Brian P. Even though we are saying goodbye to the project with pain in our hearts, we completely understand Pudge's decision. But the good news is that the EndeavourOS ARM branch is still open for anyone who wants to take over the project. If you're reading this and want to pick up where EndeavourOS ARM left off, check out the project's GitHub page and join the team. EndeavourOS is a popular GNU Linux distribution based on Arch Linux and leveraging the KDE software for its flagship ISO image. Similar to Arch Linux, EndeavourOS uses a rolling release model, but it offers several community editions with various popular desktop environments and Windows managers. So for all you Arch users out there, I know a couple of you have already mentioned it even before the show even started. Maybe jump on board and help out here.
Was this one of the ones that was recommended to people whenever they had like a
a hankering to try out Arch without
no, the tablet that everybody was getting. I cannot think of the tablet right now. The one that Moss just got.
Pine Tab.
Oh, the Pine Tab.
Thank you very much. Wasn't this one of the ones that they recommended? I know they always said Manjaro, but I thought I heard Endeavor for a while. Anyway, this is such anyone who's been involved with open source software for long enough, this story has repeated itself so many times where somebody takes initiative, does a ton of work, and like he said, it's a side thing. I'm sure the guy has a family and a different job and everything, and asks for help because there are people actually using it and doesn't get any and says, okay, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, and it's not just that, because, when you're in that position, the only people that are telling you anything are the people that have a problem. And they're usually not nice about it. Yeah. And that has to wear on you after a while.
Yeah, no doubt. So, unfortunate as it may be, but the code's there. If somebody really wanted to pick it up, they could, bring it up to date and go from there. But unless someone else does, that's it. So, all right, Majid.
Okay, then. So, Standard Notes is joining the Proton family. This is from How to Geek. So, Proton started out as a single service, the encrypted and secure Proton Mail, but has expanded since to become an entire ecosystem of connected applications. There's now a password manager, Proton Pass, cloud storage, Proton Drive, cloud calendar app, Proton Calendar, VPN, Proton VPN. And Proton has just announced that it's buying out a popular Notes app, potentially adding another useful service to that library. It's announced that it's buying out Standard Notes, an end-to-end encrypted note-taking app that currently used by 300,000 people. I am one of those, by the way. The acquisition would see Standard Notes join the ecosystem of Proton apps. It's not clear whether the service will be seeing a rebrand to Proton Notes or something along those lines. Proton is guaranteeing that the service will remain independent, but also says that Standard Notes and Proton engineers will be working together immediately, so make of that what you will. This is the second time Proton has completed an acquisition. Back in 2022, the company bought Simple Login, which later became part of the infrastructure for Proton Pass. This is the first time, though, that Proton has bought an actual app to integrate into its ecosystem. The company says that prices for the service will not be changing, and likewise, if you have an ongoing subscription to Notes, this will still be honored. Proton might choose to integrate Standard Notes into its current billing scheme, however, and into its more premium plans. So we'll have to see how that looks once this merger is a bit more finalized. Both companies say that the merger is a no-brainer. After all, Standard Notes is already an app that has high standards of security and supports end-to-end encryption. For now, we don't know when or if the app will be changing a lot as it gets more integrated into the Proton ecosystem, but you should see no major changes at the moment. has been said before. You should see no changes to how you're paying or how it's billed. Things might turn around over the course of the next couple of months. Perhaps not branding wise, but definitely in other ways at the very least. So the reason I chose this is because, as I said, I use standard notes. I use a variety of note-taking applications. My go-to for quick notes has always been Google Keep because of the fact that it's cross-platform, very easy to write on one thing and then have it somewhere else. When it comes to handwritten notes, I found OneNote by the big bad Microsoft has really good actually pen support. But if I've got important things that I want to note down, I use standard notes because of the fact that it is end-to-end encrypted and it's much more secure. It's not as fully featured. I mean, I've only got the free plan. I don't know if I'd got maybe one of the paid ones where there'll be more features. But for example, handwritten notes doesn't work as well. Pictures doesn't work as well. But as I said, for important things, which I'm not going to mention what those important things are, but important things, I use it. And it will be interesting to see how it's integrated because it's been around for a long time now. Actually, I mean, I remember I first got onto standard notes in 2018, so yeah, it's been around for a while. So there's going to be do you want to say maybe a brand cachet to it, which would mean that you wouldn't necessarily want to just completely change it into Proton notes. I suppose it depends how popular the Proton ecosystem is, really. I don't know. I don't know, maybe Bill or one of the other guys, I know you guys like Proton, but does everybody use the full suite? I mean, I've got a Proton email, and I've used the VPN once or twice, but I've not done anything more. So I don't know whether...
I think you've only got two players in that space, the one being Proton, the other being Tutanota, and Tutanota has been suffering a lot lately due to some outage. They've been having a lot of outages and things, and a lot of it is due to they almost sound like they try to put it off on somebody else, like it's not their fault that they're getting.
It's always been very bare bones. Tutanota, very bare bones.
And when honestly, there's clearly a right way to do it because you don't hear people complaining about Proton doing the same thing. So. I mean, and then there's been complaints about Tutanota not answering service emails and things like that. So it's getting a little worrying in that space, that you really only have those two players. And then when one of them is starting to slide a little bit, Proton is shining out. But not only that, Proton keeps adding these new features. They're not just sitting on their laurels, like, come to us because Tutanota sucks. They're actually working actively to improve their product, which, that's interesting. So,
but then again, I ask the same question again. I mean, how many people are using all of the different apps?
I think a lot of people are.
Yeah,
I think there are people who are bought into Proton being one of the few security and privacy focused providers of email. So right now they've got email, VPN, cloud storage, password manager, and calendar. Now they're adding in notes. I think they'll probably eventually try to do an online office thing. And I really think they're trying to be a better version of something like Google Office, their offering. And honestly, if they could make it as usable and easy to integrate into your devices, your operating system, then I think they really stand a chance, because I would certainly rather use something like that. And instead of having to self-host something like Nextcloud, this is a different offering. They also are located in one of the countries that isn't part of the, what is that? The Security 5 or whatever that, the worldwide sharing of.
Yeah.
Well, anyway. It's based in Switzerland, which has some very stringent privacy laws, and it always has had some very stringent privacy laws. It's not for nothing that the Nazis hid their gold there, unfortunately. But the only thing that's stopping me moving over to Proton, because I want to, is just I wish they'd do a Proton Drive Linux client. Once they've got that first party one, then I'm happy to move over. Up until then, I'm only just using the email and, as I said, the VPN once in a while.
That is an issue, but when when you're talking end-to-end encryption, anytime you make a desktop client for it, then you're putting another layer of abstraction in between the encryption and the encrypted source and the encrypted receiver, and it's really, really hard to manage, and it's really, really hard to say that your data is encrypted from end to end if you're supporting any kind of desktop client that would presumably
but there is
work.
a Windows one, but there is a Windows client and a Mac client.
Well, okay.
I mean, your point is true, and I'm not trying to have a go at them. And I know that all of these things require overhead, technical overhead, and investment, and all that sort of stuff. And I can understand. We have 4% apparently now of the desktop market share. So I can understand that. I can understand why they may not have got round to it now. I'm just saying, me personally.
Well, perhaps maybe then it's because there's so many more networking stacks that they would have to. They would either have to say, okay, if you want to use this, then you got to use Network Manager. If you want to use this, you have to use IWD instead of WPA supplicant or something like that. They would have to either support all of the different types of infrastructure that Linux could possibly use, or they would have to be opinionated about it and say that only this type of networking stack, because then we can control, or we can be aware of, or we can write the software such that it can handle. That's my 1,000-mile view, because it makes sense. Because they're supporting Windows, they're supporting Mac, but it's because Windows has one internet stack, one networking stack. You don't have people choosing between Network Manager and Conman or something like that. You've got the one stack that you have to support, and then that's it. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense to me, why anybody would support one thing and not another.
I don't think that's the case. I don't think the networking has anything to do with it. I'm not trying to say that you're wrong. I'm just saying that I think it's very much more about where their customers are and who's making the requests. I think Linux is still such a small fraction of their user base, even though you'd think, well, that's where the people who are interested in security and privacy are. The reality is that most people still use Windows, and then a smaller percentage use Mac. And I think that's always the reason that you see companies choosing to support those platforms first. I don't really think it goes any further than that.
No more complicated than that.
No, I really don't.
Probably right.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, I respect them for trying to provide an alternative and honestly staying in business. Any company that is providing a service like that and is able to actually make enough money to stay solvent is, I think, to be commended. So, but this is just another thing that they have to offer. So who knows? All right, Bill, you are up.
All right. So Dynabolic is a portable Linux distribution that can be used without installation. And this is from ZDNet. If you're a digital artist or multimedia creator and you've always dreamed of having an operating system that can travel with you, Dynabolic is back after a 10-year hiatus. There are plenty of Linux distributions that are geared towards specific tasks. There are distributions for desktops, servers, firewalls, routers, gaming, containers, file servers, forensic, penetration testing, and more. There are also distributions created specifically to help creatives do their thing. One of those distributions is Dynabolic, which rose in popularity a decade ago just as it ceased development. The great news for those who used to like Dynabolic is that the distribution is back. From the official announcement, 10 years have passed, and today we are back with a brand new Dynabolic 4.0 based on Devuan 5, Daedalus. Live Boot, and the Linux kernel 6.8 series. 10 years is a long time in IT, but Rastasoft is confident it's a return to form for its distribution. With the help of the KDE Plasma Desktop, Dynabolic has become a portable, creative operating system geared specifically for multimedia production, with plenty of audio and video tools to get the job done. ZDNet's key takeaways are: after a 10-year hiatus, Dynabolic is back and can be downloaded and used for free. Dynabolic has everything you need for multimedia creation and runs as a live instance, so it's portable and doesn't make any changes to your default operating system. And finally, with Dynabolic, it's I've seen this before. WYSI.
WYSIWYG.
WYSIWYG. It's WYSIWYG, so
What
you
you
don't.
see is what you get.
Yeah,
What
gotcha.
you see is what you get.
Yeah, I'm old. It's WYSIWYG, so you don't need to install any other applications. So I've never heard of this. Have any of you heard of this before?
No.
Nope.
No, I haven't.
Because I
mean, it's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But to make it portable, that's even more interesting. Because I mean, I've heard of AV Linux. I've heard of what do they call it? What's the one Ubuntu makes? Ubuntu Studio and stuff like that for creative people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But those seem to be like well, I think there was one on the Fedora side sometime back too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. There is.
But I'd never heard of this one. What's the use case?
Because we're not creatives.
Yeah, what's the advantage to having it being portable though? I wonder.
So it says this is from their website. This software is for all those who cannot afford new expensive equipment to express their consciousness in words of goodwill. The software is not just for consuming information, it is a whole series of tools for producing it. Complete multimedia studio. Thanks to it, you do not need to buy anything to express yourself. So I think their whole thing is you just put it on a USB stick, and then whatever computer you can get your hands on, you have the ability to run these applications. And I would have to think there's some sort of ability to save, your preferences, your session, use that USB key as some amount of permanent storage. I don't know.
My guess is that it also takes away any of the other distractions, and it has all of your creative stuff built into it. So you just hook it up, and this is what you're doing while you're running this operating system.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, now interesting. This is if you read the website again, this is a recommended by Free Software Foundation. So there's no non-free software included in here. So that's part of their philosophy. There's a lot of philosophical things on their website. Like in this Babylonian world, money is a vital necessity in order to make one's voice heard, and it's all about how the corporate world is. There's a lot of political and different things on here. Capitalist and ideological governments rule the world by using a monopoly on mass television and corporate social media.
Oh my!
So anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just from a perspective of just being able to use it, sometimes the whole idea of installing an operating system can be daunting for some people, whereas something like this can literally just be burned onto a USB stick and used, and you remove the stress that goes along with that. I mean, I suppose that's a thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've used certain things. What is it? Puppy, that stays on a USB stick and stuff like that. But that's usually for IT type things where you're doing recovery, file recovery, fixing systems, stuff like that. So, I think we tend to have much newer, much better equipment. And I think when they say, older equipment, they're probably talking about much older hardware and stuff. So anyway, I guess it's always good to have more choices than less. And if this is interesting to anyone, there is a link in the show notes where you can go take a look.
And by the way, I've got the show notes on the website now. So there was
Yeah, if you want to follow along.
Right, yeah. Well, I didn't have it. I forgot all about it because before the show, Majid said he was still working on his, so I waited, and then we got going in the show. I'm like, okay, yeah, I got a link in the show description going nowhere, so I ought to get that done. So, but
yeah,
now
it wasn't a prank.
Yeah, it wasn't a prank.
It wasn't a prank. Just
it was just life got in the way.
An oversight. Yeah. All right. So next up, we have apt 2.9 released. Debian's apt 3.0 to have a new UI with colors, columnar display, and more. And this is from Londoner. Apt, as the packaging tool built around Debian Linux, is embarking on some big upgrades with the apt 2.9 development series to then roll out as apt 3.0. There's big improvements to the command line user interface with the new apt, and it's certainly looking nice from my initial Friday night encounter. Released tonight was apt 2.9 as the latest version to this packaging tool used on Debian and alternatives or derivatives like Ubuntu. And this is in Londoner's voice, so catching him by surprise is the release announcement. Welcome to the apt 3.0 development series. It has a new UI for apt. It has colors, columnar display, some more padding, and shows removals, making the output more easy to quickly scan. Catching his interest, he decided to quickly try a test build of apt 2.9 on an Ubuntu box. He says, "Ooh, yes, apt is finally sporting colored text. I immediately loved the columnar format for the apt output paired with the colors and columnar format. The new text UI is a big improvement over the long-standing apt output," which I have got to agree with him there. I'm sure this looks amazing. Debian apt 2.9 is looking good. While just spending a few minutes with the new apt 2.9 build, it's a big improvement in his perspective over how apt has looked with its text user interface. This will culminate with the apt 3.0 stable release, but already the coloring and columnar layout is a big improvement for quickly sorting through the output when involving a long list of packages. It's nice looking, and I'm looking forward to apt 3.0. Downloads and more details on today's apt 2.9 release to Debian Unstable via the 2.9 announcement. Check the link in the show notes to see the various images related to this article. The article is written by Michael Laravel, and according to 9to5 Linux, apt 3.0 will be installed in the upcoming Debian GNU Linux 13 Trixie operating system series, due out in June or July of 2025, and of course, Ubuntu 24.10, which should be available later this year in October.
Now,
so I have to agree with him. Apt has been the same. How many millions of people have stared at apt like billions of times? And
Londoner,
it's been... Go ahead.
Londoner wanted it mentioned that this article is from Phoronix and it's not his words.
Oh, it's not? Okay, I just assumed that first person was from him. Okay. We will change that then. But yeah, I have to say, like, apt, perfectly functional. I don't think I've ever had it fail to perform whatever task I'm asking it to do. But in terms of reading the output, interacting with it from a user perspective, it can definitely be, a little samey, a little difficult to sort of spot different things. So I can imagine having
sometimes.
Because
everything is the same color. It's kind of, and it's flying by at whatever speed your system is doing it. Sometimes it's hard to suss out the information that you really need, and I wonder if it's just because many of the distributions that apt comes with, also ships a graphical package manager as well, and it just hasn't been a huge priority. But this, I've seen pictures of the new, what's planned for this, and it seems really cool because I do use it
Oh,
quite a
okay.
bit. Yeah. And there is
Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
they
But
got
sorry,
stuff grouped together in columns and things, and there's differences in colors between, the going from one task to another, and it makes it a lot easier to understand what's actually happening. So it's cool when stuff like this gets a little love, I think.
Yeah. I always understand why they don't want to touch. I mean, apt is about as core a tool to Debian as you can get. So I understand why they don't tend to mess with it. Plus, I think people are kind of, especially some Debian folks, are pretty hardcore when it comes to not, overdoing things or making things fancy for no reason. So,
especially the
but
people that would use a terminal-based package manager. Yeah, they would be the last people that would want something like that changed. So,
all right. Well, that is our news section. Let's go ahead and move on. So, in security and privacy, we have one article. Take it away, Majid.
Okay, so over 92,000 exposed D-Link NAS devices have a backdoor account. This is from Bleeping Computer. A threat researcher has disclosed a new arbitrary command rejection and hard-coded backdoor flaw in multiple end-of-life D-Link network attached storage or NAS devices. The researcher who discovered the flaw, NetSecFish, explains that the issue resides within the cgi-bin/nas_sharing.cgi script, impacting its HTTP GET request handler component. The two main issues contributing to the flaw, tracked as CVE 2024-3273, are a backdoor facilitated through a hard-coded account, username, message bus, and empty password, and a command injection problem via the system parameter. When chained together, any attacker can remotely execute commands on the device. The command injection flaw arises from adding a base 64 encoded command to the system parameter via HTTP GET request, which is then executed. Successful exploitation of the vulnerability could allow an attacker to execute arbitrary commands on the system, potentially leading to unauthorized access to sensitive information, modification of system configurations, or denial of service conditions, warns the researcher. The device models are impacted are in the show notes. NetSecFish says network scans show that 92,000 vulnerable D-Link NAS devices exposed online and susceptible attacks through these flaws. After contacting D-Link about the flaw and whether a patch would be released, the vendor told us that these NAS devices had already reached end of life and are no longer supported. They say all D-Link network attached storage has been end of life and of service life for many years, and the resources associated with these products have ceased their development and are no longer supported. D-Link recommends retiring these products and replacing them with products that receive firmware updates, they continued. The spokesperson also told Bleeping Computer that the impacted devices do not have automatic online updating capabilities or customer outreach features to deliver notifications like the current models. Hence, the vendor was limited to a security bulletin published yesterday to raise the awareness about the flaw and the need to retire or replace those devices immediately. D-Link has set up a dedicated support page for legacy devices where owners can navigate archives to find latest security and firmware updates. Those who insist on using outdated hardware should at least apply the latest available updates, even if these won't address newly discovered problems like this one. Furthermore, NAS devices should never be exposed to the internet as they are commonly targeted to steal data or encrypt in ransomware attacks. Okay.
Don't update, buy new.
Yeah, that's kind of
e-waste.
Well, that's kind of what it says. And on one hand, I kind of understand from a hardware perspective. They're like, look, there's only so many things we can support, but right. It's a bad look, isn't it? And this thing about that NAS devices should never be exposed to the internet. I mean, let's be honest, quite a lot of people's NASs are. So anyway, I suppose actually this shows that it's good to have something that's open source, by the way.
I would be okay with what they're saying here if they actually provided a way to unlock the operating system on those NASs so that people can put on custom software and make it work right. Instead of just throw your stuff away and buy our new product. Here it is, all shiny and new.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, if there was, that was my open source point, that if these things were open and you could get different firmwares or core boots or whatever the relevant things are, then that would be fine. It's the fact that you can't do any of that. And yeah, it's just it's planned obsolescence taken to the extreme, isn't it?
Yep. And
I
actually,
think most of the point with these NAS devices that you see commercially available, they are commercial products, and they're not making any money on keeping an old product working well into the future. I think people who
Right, they
want
make money selling the next model.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think people who are interested in and care about making sure that it's got open source software on it and it's kept up to date and it's something that you have data sovereignty. If all that's what's important to you, then you should just build this thing with the old fashioned way with an old computer. And
I like that. I like that term, data sovereignty. I
Yeah.
like that. Good
Yeah,
way
I mean,
of putting
I
it,
think-
actually.
So this is actually relevant to me because Synology has decided to stop supporting a subset of their NAS devices. And I've had one of their disk station, I think it's a DS412 Plus, for, I'm going to say, if not 10 years, then maybe a little more. So I get that it's an older piece of hardware. I don't necessarily think it's realistic to expect them to support it forever.
Right.
But I do think if there were any serious security flaws, that this idea that they just, pass the buck and say, well, nobody should be using that. Look, that thing has been in my closet. It has worked perfectly the whole time. It shows no signs of any issues whatsoever. It does exactly what it needs to do. And now if I'm worried about it being out of date, I have to essentially replace it. And maybe it's possible to run some third-party OS or system on it. I'll have to research that. I think they're end of lifing at the end of this year, maybe something like that. So I still have some time to look at it, but it puts me in a position where either I have to transition all of the data that's on there, which is in their format, by the way. The disks are formatted with their own sort of proprietary formatting. To some other format or something. Like I've got terabytes worth of data. So NAS is not just as easy as like a router where you plug in some cables and, a basic configuration and whoop-dee, you're done. Like a NAS is a serious thing. You have to deal with a lot of data and other things. Yeah, it's a weird position. I'm not sure I've had a piece of equipment that has been that reliable for that long, that useful, that is now basically going to be unsupported, and what I need to do about it. So,
I mean,
Yeah.
I would find that to be unacceptable, that all of a sudden, I mean, yeah, okay, I'll take the point that you can't just keep supporting something indefinitely forever. Sure, but
Yeah.
you got to give people a route to achieve some sort of security without having to go through, and because these are considered, I mean, they're not the most expensive thing in the world, but these Synologies, they're not free.
They're not cheap.
I mean,
They're not cheap. If you want a good one, they're not cheap.
and
This is a 4-bay. I think I paid probably $700, maybe
Yeah,
$800
see,
at the time. But I will say that during the lifespan of this device, it has been absolutely faultless and has fit into my system perfectly. It helps me with backups. Like, it has done literally every single thing I've wanted it to do. So I think that was money well spent, considering I've gotten such a long life out of it. And yes, you can run your own NAS. And before I had this, I had a Debian server that I had been running for probably 7 years before that just got so long in the tooth I didn't trust it anymore. But I also had to actively manage it and maintain it, much more so than I do with the Synology, which is sort of a set and forget, check in every so often setup. And I know a lot of people want to do it themselves, but if you've got enough going on in your life, I don't know that you want to be dealing with
Right.
with that.
But
so.
instead of, making e-waste and saying,
Yes.
oh, this is no
Yeah,
longer
there's that
supported,
too.
get rid of it, buy new, make it so that, even if I own this NAS that's no longer going to be supported and I do buy a new one, I can sell my old one and someone else that wants to can put the custom firmware, custom software on there and not have it go to a landfill and have it still be useful and secure.
Right.
Yeah. Yep, 100%.
I think anybody that's going to if you're in the process of deciding if you want to build a NAS or pay for a pre-built solution like a Synology, you need to ask yourself a few questions. Are you all right with the idea that this is something that is, as Eric said, it is reliable, but it is in a format that might not be so easy to transfer onto something else if you change your mind in the future, and can you handle the idea that you might spend $700 for this thing right now and it might 7 years from now be completely obsolete by way of software support. But on the other hand, do you want to be if you build a NAS with Ubuntu or whatever operating system and then set up your storage pools and all that stuff yourself, considering you have the skill set, do you want to be the person that has to be the steward of this thing, because the responsibility will lie squarely on your shoulders, and it can be a lot, depending on what it is you're storing on that thing, so it's pretty important and it shouldn't be taken lightly.
Yeah, and just doing a quick check. I mean, it looks like some people have been able to get Linux to run on that model, but it's pretty out of date because it's an old device, and I would assume a lot of them have been sunsetted already. But
yeah,
something to deal with later in the year, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it does. You're right, Bill. It does give me pause. Is Synology something I want to stick with, even though I've gotten really good utility and value for the money out of this? It is a bit of a sticking point. Do I trust that, they don't support the next one as long as they've supported this one? Or maybe it's not the right fit anymore. Maybe there's another company making better products. So that's just research I'm going to have to do at some point. But that was our security section. So let's move on. First up in our bi-weekly wonderings is Bill.
Yeah, well, I purchased one of these handheld retro gaming devices from Amazon after listening to an episode of Linux Unplugged where Chris, Wes, and Brent raved on and on about this thing. And I have to say, they were right. This thing is actually kind of cool. It has most of the top emulators by default, including some I've never heard of. The number of games preloaded on it is staggering. It runs on a forked version of Ubuntu 19.10, which, is out of date. But because the device isn't connected to the network as such, it's not a big deal, I don't think. I haven't had it long enough to really run into the use cases where internet connectivity would be necessary. The device is called the R36S, made by a company called Mannion. I got a link in the show notes to take you to the Amazon page for it. The form factor is somewhat, and you can see if you're looking at the YouTube, you can see it in my hand. It's somewhat resembling the Game Boy, except it's got these trigger buttons on the back, kind of like what you would expect on a modern game controller, along with the two joysticks. Those buttons are probably, so far, the only thing I've seen that uses them is the PlayStation 1 emulated games. It's provisioned for 2 micro SD cards. Presumably one is for the OS and the other is for the games and the media files. The device bills itself as a multifunction entertainment device, so you can take your downloaded movies, music, and whatnot on the go. I don't know. In the time of Spotify and YouTube, I'm not sure what value a device, which essentially offers the additional functionality of a Zune, what
And also, since
value that
the
offers.
screen isn't, and also since the screen doesn't seem to be the most. I mean, I wouldn't want to watch a movie on that screen.
Well, I mean, yeah,
You
you
know.
say that, but I mean,
I mean,
they're trying to
because
sell it.
I mean, I know. No. It does look really cool, I must say, and I'm itching now to buy one now. But I'm just saying that of all the things I would use it for, watching a movie on a 3.5-inch 640 by 400
Right.
IPS display is probably not what I'm going to do.
Look, putting movies on it, if you're putting movies or music on it or anything like that, you're getting on a plane and you're handing it to your kids.
That's
the ones
it.
that don't have cell phones already.
Yeah, that's absolutely it.
Yeah,
Because,
good point.
You know, other than that,
point,
you're
well
probably
made.
you're more likely to watch movies on your phone, you know, using Netflix or what have you. But the fact that it'll do it is kind of cool. And as Majid said, it is a 4:3 ratio screen, which is actually appropriate for the type of games it plays. I think the newest thing on here is the PSP, the PlayStation Portable, and it's got a bunch of games that came with those. And I remember how much my two older boys, how much money we spent on those things, and
oh yeah,
and the games that go with them, and how fragile those things were. And then here's this thing that plays exactly the same way from an SD card. It's just amazing to me how things like this have progressed in a relatively.
What games actually on it?
Okay, so
All
it's
of them.
got. I'll go ahead and go through the emulators real quick here.
Mm-hmm.
Because it runs on Ubuntu, so I haven't done it, but presumably you can add more emulators to it.
Is this like a RetroArch front end to Ubuntu?
You asked me that before. I cannot tell what it's running on the back end. It's got its own sort of, I don't know if you can see the interface here, but
it's probably a skinned RetroArch.
Yeah, it's got to be something along that lines, but it's Family Computer, Super Famicom, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, Sega Mega Drive, Sega Genesis, Dreamcast, Neo Geo, Neo Geo Pocket, Neo Geo Pocket Color, PlayStation, PSP, or PlayStation Portable. And, I mean, just Capcom 1, Capcom 2, Capcom 3, PC Engine. I mean, that's an awful lot. There's a couple there that, like, there's no Atari games, which that's kind of disappointing. But as I said, there's got to be a way to add that on there. I just haven't figured it out yet because I haven't had time to.
If it's like other installs of handheld RetroArch, then you set up the folder structure on the micro SD card, and then you have all the different ROM folders, and you just dump the ROMs into those folders, and it just works.
Some games are better than others. Like there was what was it? 007 was the game that you wanted me to try. And
because it's one of the hardest to emulate.
Yeah, and it was a little touch and go. It worked, but the sound was choppy, and that for most of the games people really want to play. If all you want to play is Tetris or Mario or all of basically every Zelda game up to the Nintendo 64. I think there was 2 of them on there, or at least there's 2 of them that are listed on here for the Nintendo 64. It's got all that. You could sit and play Tetris until your time is done on this earth. So it's kind of cool. I bought it because it's Linux and people were talking about it and they seemed to like it. So I thought,
that form factor is like really cool, and I wouldn't mind having one, but I have other things that do the exact same thing.
Right.
And that one has actually reviewed pretty well. I mean, you could spend just days going through YouTube videos of various different emulation station style handhelds, and yeah, the R36S is a good one. And yeah, If you don't have anything else that does retro style, or if you want something easily that you can put in your pocket and carry around that's not your phone, then by all means, this is a good one to have.
Yeah, it's true though. Pretty much every single one of them can be emulated with its own thing, or through RetroArch on your laptop or your desktop, and you're gonna have much better results, or at least a bigger screen. The battery life on this thing is about what you would expect. Perhaps a little better than something with real high speed graphics, though. It seems to last a good part of the day.
3 to 5 hours?
At least 5 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got a big old battery in it, and it can be plugged into, if it does run low, it can be plugged into USB-C, just like a modern smartphone, and charged while you're using it. And more impressively, it has a user replaceable battery. So it's kind of, you remember the old lid you pop open and there'd be a battery in there, and you pull that out and you put another one in. Sit around, kids.
Well, if you could get multiple batteries and an external charger, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Why does my mouse keep running?
Overall, I'm pleased with the little device, and I recommend it to anybody who would enjoy an on-the-go retro gaming experience device, what have you. Best of all, it runs Linux. If it didn't do that, I wouldn't have any interest in it. But so anyway, I want to take advantage of my wanderings to talk a little bit about a relatively new feature we've implemented on the show. Sometime back, I announced that we've begun offering clickable chapter timestamps for the audio-only version of the show for podcast players that support the Podcasting 2.0 feature sets. Listeners can now skip around to the sections they want to listen to, either from the chapters menu on their podcast players or from the timestamp on the episode description. So it's actually in two places. Okay, so to that we've added the ability to actually go to the specific section of the show notes related to the section of the show of your choice. Each timestamp consists of two separate links, one which instructs the player to jump to the desired spot in the show, and the other opens up the show notes directly to the section the listener wants. And technically that was achieved by applying HTML anchors to different sections as I'm creating the web pages. And then when I make a link to the page, if I add that HTML anchor to the end, it basically opens up that page and takes you right to that section. It's been around forever, but I think it's cool. So if for those of you that listen to the show through the browser on the website, you have the same functionality on each episode page. I'd be interested to know what everybody thinks of that. I'm not sure if anybody knew that it existed or if anybody had taken advantage of it whatsoever. Let us know, mintcast@mintcast.org, or comment directly on the website, because it was the timestamps were one thing that I thought were kind of necessary and thought they were worthwhile. But along with that, I mean, it was actually easier to add the links for the show notes, because otherwise, when you're making it's a JSON basically, but the template or the tool that you use to create that JSON fights you if you don't add something in the line for the link to go somewhere visually. So I went ahead and decided to implement that feature, and it might help people out. You never know. Because sometimes our show notes can be formidable. It's true. The mintCast has some pretty impressive show notes for a podcast. I mean, these are the kind of thing. These show notes would be the kind of thing you would get an assignment back in high school, and it would take you all semester to write something like this up, and we're making these every other week, So to have a tool to jump from one section directly to another, I thought was pretty cool. So anyway, that's all I've got. How about you, Joe?
Well, I've had some more Steam Deck fun. I've really been enjoying messing around with this thing, and I'm really happy I decided to keep it. Now, I did play a bunch of Skyrim, which I tend to play in the evenings with if my wife is playing one of the Batman games, so that we are spending time in the same room doing something together. Now, my wife did also get Skyrim the Anniversary Edition, and she puts it up on the TV on her her Nintendo Switch. So I saw that it had some really cool features that aren't in the special edition that I had from several years ago. So I went and got the Anniversary Edition so that I too can have fire arrows and ice arrows and bone arrows and all these new houses that you can buy. So yeah, I think it was a good purchase for $20. It did get a whole lot of extra functionality out of Skyrim, and I'm enjoying playing it when I do play it. But I also redid my retro setup and decided to try out EmuDeck, which I am very impressed with. I also added a 64 gigabyte micro SD card and then used my old PSP setups to transfer a bunch of games over and get started with testing and playing. I'm still working on getting MAME working correctly, but most of the others are working well. I spent some time playing the PS1 version of Hydro Thunder. I really love that game. I was playing it in arcades when in my late teens, early 20s. And on the handheld, on the Steam Deck, it worked perfectly. I had to tweak some settings for the refresh rate to get NES running well. So, like Super Mario, when I first loaded it up, the audio was horrible and it was just janky as heck trying to run. But once you adjust that refresh rate down to like 30, it sounded and worked great. No more lag. Now, I was also able to find some videos online of people playing the 360 version of Hydro Thunder Hurricane on the deck. And, I was interested in giving that a try. None of the listed methods that use to rip the BIOS or the game to get it running, so I have to do some research. I like the original version, but it lacks any kind of story mode or being able to, build on itself. Now, I will say I did get Hydro Thunder Hurricane working on the Steam Deck with quite a lot of work. There was I had to adjust some of the startup scripts for it, but it is working. Now, I attempted to get Crimson Skies, the Xbox version, running on Crimson Skies High Road to Redemption, running on the EmuDeck, but I had the same issues with the HUD I was having with the app image. EmuDeck uses the Flatpak. I was able to do some more research, and in the comments on Reddit to someone else's post, I found a fix that worked to be able to create the HUD. It's a bit smaller than I would like, but now the game is at least playable. I need to get good at it again, however. I am way out of practice. So hopefully I get a chance to play that around all the other stuff I'm playing. Now, I know I talked last time about the design that I was doing for a mounted rail system on the Steam Deck, but I decided to go in a different direction. I found that a commercial company was releasing their product as a 3D model, and I decided to go with that. It's called the Deckmate. If you get a chance, check it out. It provides a quick release latch system and frame that wraps around the back of the Steam Deck. Now, if you're building it yourself, it requires 2 springs and 3 heatset inserts and 3 screws, as well as some double-sided tape for the universal mount. The instructions call for 2.5 millimeter heatset inserts and the screws as well, but all I have is the 3 millimeter. But I was able to make it work with some minor issues. I did not want to spend a lot of time or a lot of money on hardware, so I used the 3 millimeter inserts. And I also got some pens from the dollar store to get the springs from them, and that worked just fine. Now, the amount of heat required to put in the inserts caused a couple of problems with the shape, but I was able to put things back into mostly correct positions, and I got 2 of the ones that I printed working the way that I wanted. Now, I'm planning on putting a battery on one of them, but the other I decided to put on a port replicator / hub on there and see how I like that one. Instead of just using the Steam Deck dock, I now have this. I also 3D printed a different stand to try out that has nubs for the screw holes in the back, allowing for a more stable base and less sliding around in the dock. It also fits really well with the deck mate attached, and it stays on, the stand stays on when you pick it up. This helps when you're setting it on your knee to be able to play games. Now, I also went back and played some more Borderlands 2. I know previously I'd had some issues with some precision on there, but I adjusted the controls and turned on some gyroscopic aiming, which allows for a bit more precision and control. And while I'm not as good with it as I am with a keyboard and mouse, I find it playable. Now, my hunt for a new low-cost soundbar has seen some movement. At this point, I probably would have been better off just buying new, but, I like taking my chances. I got a used 16-inch soundbar from Goodwill for an okay price. Surprise, surprise, when I got home, it didn't turn on. Now, this, of course, actually made me happy. The first thing that I checked was the power supply, which was working fine. But then I started taking it apart. Turns out I was not the first person to do that, and the last person that had taken it apart had snapped the tiny ribbon cable that goes to the controls. Now, I've watched videos of people trying for hours and hours to get those fixed with no luck at the end, but I decided to give it a shot anyway. It actually was really simple for me to do. I removed the broken portion and set that to the side and pulled out my needle files and very carefully shaved down what was left to the new copper. Then I superglued the insertion piece, that little blue thing that sticks on the back of the cable to make it more easily fit in, from the broken cable onto the back of the part that I had filed, and very carefully inserted that into the connector. Took a little force because it's just that little bit thicker, but it went in and it closed without breaking. Did take some work to get it re-screwed back into place without putting any pressure on that connector, but in the end, it worked. I loved that fix. There was a bunch more stuff that I did, but I think I'm going to save the rest of it for my next bi-weekly in case I get a slow couple of weeks and nothing happens. So that's it for me, unless you guys got something to say about that. Majid?
The only thing I was going to say was, have you tried using the Steam Deck on to bigger screens yet?
Yes, I have. Where my wife has the Nintendo Switch connected to the television in our bedroom, I previously had set it up so that I could take hers down and connect mine, and I've done that once or twice with Skyrim, and I have been using the controller. What was it? The Google Stadia controller? Was that it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I'd redone the firmware on that so that it's Bluetooth. And that works really well, but I think I might try the 8BitDo controller and see how I like that. Just because it's also got the two buttons on the back that I could remap to something.
I mean, I've been looking at on eBay to see if there are any kind of Steam Decks, what kind of prices they're going for and stuff. I've been tempted to get one, but I don't know if it will just turn into one of my
Dust collectors.
many purchases which I don't use.
Yeah, I had my same concerns, but I am using it on a semi-regular basis. I haven't the last couple of days because I've had other stuff going on, but I do see myself using this quite a bit.
Good stuff.
All right, over to you, Majid.
Okay then. So, Ramadan finished this week and we had our Eid festival. I ate a lot of biryani and desserts. It was nice to have some family time. Eid Mubarak to everyone. Which also made me realize that it's now my 1-year anniversary of being on mintCast. Doesn't time fly when you're having fun? Eh?
Well done, Majid.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hope it's been there's been some fun shows. I hope people like it. You know,
There's been one or two.
Somebody, yeah, yes, there have been. And I did want to mention that I was on OTC last week. Now, this was not my best. Unfortunately, I had been suffering with a really bad tooth infection, and I was dosed up on painkillers. And frankly, I was high as a kite. I was trying to. I had no insight during the podcast,
but
then when I
nonetheless
listened to it
chatty.
afterward, yes, I know. To be honest, I'm just lucky it didn't get any worse, frankly.
We were very sympathetic to your plight.
Yeah.
Certainly
yes,
didn't
of
make
course,
fun of
of
you
course.
or
Yeah, definitely.
Right. What he
yes,
said.
you know, I could feel the love through the, through the internet connections. I mean, it was either that or that was again the codeine.
Pretty sure that was the codeine.
Yeah, it was the codeine. Yeah. I mentioned last week that I'd put Mint on my wife's Elite book, so this is like this kind of Surface clone HP device. And my wife and my daughter were liking using it. It was more performant than the Windows 10 that was on there originally. However, they didn't like the reduced battery life. Now, I don't actually think it's a massive decrease compared to the Windows 10 install. As I said, it's an 8-year-old device. It's never had changed in batteries. It's not. I can't imagine it being brilliant anyway. But I think what annoyed them, and to be fair, I can kind of see their point, is that it didn't drain uniformly. It was kind of like, it would say 2 hours remaining on the battery, and then 20 minutes later, it would say 10 minutes left, and they should be like, whoa, what's going on? Now, I suppose the argument that, you should never believe those things anyway, but, it did seem to kind of, it wasn't a uniform linear decrease in battery life, and I think it did impact my daughter because she did actually lose some of her work because she believed the battery counter and thought that there would be another, I don't know, an hour and a half or whatever, and then it died in the middle and she hadn't saved. I therefore decided to install Slimbook battery. So we've talked about this before, I think, in mintCast and in Innards, when we talked about how to prolong battery life, especially on laptops, with these kinds of utilities. It does seem like the battery is lasting longer, but I'm not sure it's uniform. So I've kind of told them don't trust those things, And I mean, it's not as if it's ever used out of the house anyway. So I don't really know why they don't just plug it in. But hey, that's women for you. I thought I'd actually try on my other devices as well. So I put it onto my Mint, my ZenBook, which is running Mint 21.3 Edge. Works fine. Again, it gave me some spectacular numbers. 8 hours left on battery life. Again, I don't know how much I believe it. I tried it. I installed it also onto my 23.10 box, and it doesn't seem to work. I mean, it installs, and I try and launch it. No GUI comes up, and if I try launching it from somewhere else, like the terminal or whatever, it just says it's running. It's probably my fault somehow, as user error, but I just need to figure out why it's doing that. As I mentioned last week as well, I've been using Screen Copy or Scripty, the man, the apps with no vowels. I have noticed though, again, it's a little bit problematic at times. So when it was on my Mint ZenBook, it was working fine, and the touchscreen, I was able to use the touchscreen on the ZenBook to interact with my phone, which was pretty cool. I tried it on my Ubuntu machine, running 23.10, and the touchscreen bit wouldn't work. But I suppose that's not the biggest thing, problem in the world. I've been trying to get the wireless thing, wireless screen mirroring working, and I couldn't for the life of me doing it. Get it to work. For some reason, because I was doing it on the Ubuntu box, it sees 2 devices over ADB when I plug my S24 Ultra in, which I don't know why that would.
Well,
go on.
If you were trying out the wireless and you had turned the wireless on in your phone and then you connected wirelessly to that ADB and then you plugged it in, then there would be 2 devices.
Was it plugged? Was it plugged in USB and connected?
Yeah, wireless? It was plugged in USB.
Yeah,
it was plugged in USB because that's what I heard. That you plug it in, You then the access to
You use
TCP port.
ADB. Yeah.
Yeah.
ADB devices
And then
or whatever.
yeah, ADB devices. It says that it's attached, but it was saying, as I said, 2 devices. And then when I went to connect wirelessly, it would say, it just wouldn't basically. And then when I unplugged it, it would have now only see no devices, having seen 2 devices before.
Interesting.
Yeah. As I said, it's probably my user error. But yeah, I haven't figured that out. Speaking of 2310, I've heard the 2404 beta is out, so I might try that out. I moved back to Firefox after my experiment with Flop. This was the first time I'd actually noticed not significant, but I'd actually noticed any kind of meaningful difference between the ESR versions of Firefox, which is what Flop is based on, and the more, the latest versions of it. I mean, for example, the touchscreen, it didn't work. The ESI just isn't as good with touchscreen stuff. I know there was a couple of tips that some of you guys put up in the Discord. I couldn't get them to work, but again, that's probably user error. When I was downloading it though, I did wonder which format would be best. I mean, I know that the Snap isn't great, but then this was on my Mint device, so that didn't have Snap anyway. There's apparently some discussion online that the Flatpak is better than the Deb, which I thought was the wrong way around. I always thought that the Deb, being a system package, would be better than the Flatpak. So I decided to go with the Flatpak. I can't say I noticed much difference, to be completely honest. Although I have heard that it does have it can cause issues with theming and Nextcloud and dark themes and stuff. And I think we were talking about this in our Discord as well, weren't we? About how the show notes, which I hosted on our Nextcloud, weren't opening up correctly or something on Firefox. So anyway, that's that. After having resurrected my Pixel 3a and OnePlus 6 with Lineage OS, I actually managed to sell both of them. Quite modest prices, to be fair. I suppose I could have got more, but since they were both at one point they were both dead. Thank you, Linux phones, flipping Ubuntu Touch, whatever. I'm taking it as a win, I had thought of giving one of them to my mother, as I mentioned last time, because she's running this. So I actually checked out what model it was. It was some kind of, Chinese brand Amazon phone. It's actually a Umidigi Power, which I bought from Amazon 5 years ago, and it has had no software updates since 2019, and has had no security updates since I think 2021. My mom was kind of like, no, but my phone is fine, it is okay for me, right? In that voice. And then she said that if she was going to be convinced to have a new phone, then she wanted one with 128 gigs of storage, because she was finding that 64 gigs was not enough. Now, that actual device does actually have a micro SD card slot, and I put a 32 gig micro SD card in, but she isn't technical enough. I mean, she's a 74-year-old little old Asian lady. So, she couldn't figure out how to default save images, videos, etc. to the micro SD. So my way around this
on that,
go on.
You can anything that's, what is it, Android 10 or above, or 9 or above. You can make it's almost like a RAID stripe, where it stripes across the system storage and onto the SD card. You can choose that as an option, or the separate storage, which would have been...
Essentially, you're making the SD card an extension of the internal storage. It makes it think that it's internal storage.
Right, which simplifies it for people that really don't know how to decide, should I store it on the phone or store it on the SD card? That is an option.
I mean, this was, when I looked through the software, this was still running Android 9. I mean, it's just...
It was time for her to get something new.
Yeah, it was. So anyway, my way around all of this was, I thought, well, I will give her the Redmi 12, which I'd only recently bought as a work phone. I mean, the work don't pay me to have a phone, but they do pay my mobile phone bill. So I have a kind of so all my airtime is whatever paid, but obviously the devices I buy myself. So I'd bought this only recently, actually, a Redmi 12 Plus Xiaomi device, which was also 5G and had 128 gigs of storage. Pretty reasonable specs, actually. I mean, it was running a MediaTek Dimensity 1080, which is probably comparable to like a Snapdragon 7 series. So it's a decent chip that was in there. And it was getting updates. I mean, in the 6 weeks that I'd had it, it had already been updated to the latest Android 14. I mean, you might say, okay, Android 15 is coming out, but these Chinese manufacturers aren't exactly known for their software support. And I did have my eye on one of the Nothing phones. I'd been kind of fascinated by Nothing as a brand. I mean, I'd had their earbuds, the Nothing Ear Ones. They remind me a lot of the way OnePlus was in the early days. I mean, that's probably not surprising because Carl Pei, who runs Nothing, was the brainchild, behind OnePlus. But there is that kind of, they have that kind of lean aesthetic. It's all a bit funky and cool and whatever. I mean, the glyph thing is a little bit gimmicky, but But so the Nothing Phone 2A for a 8 gig, 128 gig storage, running a Dimensity 7200 Pro, which I checked is about the same as a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. So still, again, pretty decent chip. £319. I thought, okay, Mum gets the Redmi, I get the Nothing phone.
So what you're saying is you gave your mom a phone as an excuse to buy yourself a new toy.
Pretty much, yeah.
Got it.
I've done it with laptops and my wife.
Yeah, so many things.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, I've been wanting to get her a new phone for ages, but she was just being so this. And the only way I managed it actually to get her to accept it was that I said that it was from me and my sons. I said that, and you know what it's like when it comes to grandchildren, flipping out grandparents let their grandchildren get away with anything and whatever. And now, you know what? Surprisingly, she's actually really happy. She's like, oh, this phone, it's not slow, and I've got lots of memory, and I don't have any problems. The other weird thing is that, again, as I said, she's not the most technical person in the world. She was, it turns out, in her WhatsApp backups, she was automatically uploading all the videos that she was getting, which was 17 gigs worth of videos. And then she was like, my Google Drive isn't working. Yeah, that's because you used up all your storage, Mom, by uploading videos.
It probably popped up and asked her, would you like to back this up? And she thought, oh, yeah, I probably should.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably.
Yeah. Anyway, she has insisted
My
that
son is always saying that I need to back up everything, so...
Yeah. Fair point.
That's true.
She did insist that I sell that old phone. I mean, I'm not going to get anything beyond, pocket money for that. So I'm looking at other uses. Dash cam is my favorite idea so far. And that's why I've actually put something in, check this out, about how to repurpose an old Android phone. So the Galaxy Buds 2 Pro, which I'd got on a good price, I decided to keep them because they've gone back up in price now. So I won't be able to get them that cheap again, I don't think, at least not for a while. I found out why I found that they didn't sound as good as the reviews had suggested or in compared to other ones. And it's because I had the 360 spatial audio settings on. It increases the treble and the high end in general. When I switched it off and just had normal, it was fine. In fact, it was a lot better. And with good ANC and stuff like that. And so, I'm going to keep that. I'd mentioned last time that I had a free trial of Amazon Music Unlimited, and I thought I'd use it to try all this spatial audio stuff. And yeah, it was fine for a bit, but I thought it's not worth an extra £10 a month on top of my Prime subscription. And I wasn't going to be cancelling my Spotify for the slightly better quality that I was getting. If nothing else, because I've got playlists and all that sort of stuff set up on Spotify, which I can migrate, but it's a pain to do so. Now, I knew when this was going to be renewing. It was going to be renewing on the 4th of April. So I had, even put a thing in my calendar that I was, to cancel it. And I did my best to cancel it. This was not an easy process. It required a bit more Googling than I anticipated. It wasn't just like a, tab in, my settings, my account. I did it on my phone, through the app, through the mobile browser, and I was pretty sure it was cancelled. And then the other day, I decided just to check on my desktop browser, just because I was just sat there and I wasn't doing anything. It had not cancelled. As the appropriate cancel membership button was buried deep in some other setting and not the bit that I was looking at. So I'm not impressed with that, Amazon, at all. They have charged me for another month. So they've got 10 quid out of me for nothing. It's interesting, actually, because Mr. Who's the Boss had a good YouTube video on how companies scam you, with certification and stuff like that. And one of the ways is signing you up for free trials, and then, you forget. And then, by the time you remembered, you've already paid them X amount of money and whatever. I mean, I'm actually half tempted to actually uninstall the apps now straight away, because it's like, I don't even know why I should even use you. But I suppose if I've got it for another couple of weeks, I might as well. I'm planning on using my S24 Ultra for more games. This is kind of why I was asking about whether you'd use your Steam Deck on, big screen devices and stuff, because one option is, I play more games on my phone. Second option is, do I get a dedicated, Steam Deck, that kind of device? One of the theories I had was I could use Dex and play it on the big screen. And I have an old PS4 controller which I can pair and see whether that works as a decent controller. But I might get a newer one which has USB-C, because the PS4 one is still a micro USB charger, and I haven't got as many of them as I used to. So I think I might try that out. But yeah, the other option is just buy a Steam Deck. Depends how cheap I can get one.
You're looking at about $350 if you're not getting the OLED. If you're getting the OLED, it's a bit more. Now, the S24 Ultra will definitely do the style of gaming that you're talking about, as long as you're talking about for like retro games or Android games.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at a USB-C controller, I highly recommend either the Stadia or the 8-bit Do. Either one, Bluetooth, works awesome.
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen the 8-bit do, but they do quite a few different types, don't they? They do like one that's a bit more retro, and then there's a Pro, which
the Pro. I recommend the Pro.
Okay, cool. I've actually had that up on a different tab. Actually, I'll have a look at that later. In TV news, I'm continuing with Constellation on Apple TV. Well, not on Apple TV, but it's slow, but it is good. I was excited when X-Men 97 started a couple of weeks ago on Disney. And, there was a big nostalgia kind of kick of, watching, I was at school when, those X-Men cartoons were around, and, I was a big fan of it at the time. And so the first couple of episodes were good, and then I thought they started just, playing a little bit much on the nostalgia and stuff like that. So I was a bit... And so when the latest episode came, episode 5, I decided to skip that. This was a mistake, because as I was then, surfing the internet and seeing, well, actually, I wonder what happened in episode 5. I came across an extremely spoiler-filled review explaining what happened, and then I had to kind of stop it straight away and then go and start watching it. Oh my God, what an episode. Even with all the spoilers, I was...
That's the continuation of the 90s one, right?
Yeah, it's a continuation, yeah.
Okay.
It is very, very good. It is... it's amazing me now. I mean, as I spoke about it with regards to Invincible before, as to how much emotion and pathos and character development you're getting in animated series compared to the live stuff sometimes. And this was good. It was good. I would recommend it to anybody. As I said, episodes 3 and 4 are a bit meh, but this was something. I've always been a Nirvana fan. It's one of the reasons I learned to play guitar. However, I seem to have missed the fact that they were the Live and Loud Seattle show, which they did in late '93, early '94, on MTV, had actually been released, and so I found that on the interwebs. And I've got to be honest, it's probably the best live performance of them I've seen, and the audio is really good. Novoselic's bass is amazing on it, and they're playing a lot of the In Utero stuff because In Utero had just been 6 months earlier had been released, and I'd not heard a lot of that stuff live. So that was really good. I fell into a real YouTube rabbit hole, by the way. There's a guy, Niall Stenson, his name is. He does metal covers of old cartoon shows. And I'll tell you, I was stuck for an hour just going down.
Link.
Yes, the link will be in somewhere. My scheduling hasn't been the best again, actually. Having done a 24-hour shift last week, I'm doing 2 this week, and I'm working 3 weekends on the trot. So I'm not really looking forward to it. I mean, you can imagine this is a bit anxiety-inducing. Let's hope I, and more importantly, the patients, get through it all. So that's me. And speaking of patients, we have Eric and his bi-weeklies, which are a bit longer, I think, than a bi-weekly, isn't it? It's like a bi-yearly or something.
Well, for me, it is. I mean, I'm usually, since I go last and you guys have so much, I usually feel like I should probably pare mine down. To which Joe told me the other day, no, just put it all in. So
put it all in, dude. Put it all in.
Yeah. Anyway, a quick comment on yours. Has anybody ponied up the $2.99 a month to watch Prime without commercials?
No.
I'm going to.
I have.
I'm going to.
I have, just because it annoyed me so much. I couldn't stand it. And I'm like, you know what? I hate paying them a dime more, but I will gladly pay $3 a month to not have to watch commercials.
And honestly, we were just having this conversation last night. I said, okay, so what? They're trying to, because until you mentioned that, I didn't know that they were actually offering that tier, but of course they are. And I told the wife, I said, this is just them trying to sap $5 more out of us so that we don't have to watch their like 50% of the ads are for things they know we've already got, like the Frontier internet service. And, it's weird. And I know they know, but I will probably, now that I know this exists, thank you for that. I am going to do that today because I cannot stand watching even one ad in the middle of my show.
I mean,
I just started.
I was just going to say that a lot of the stuff that I've been watching hasn't had ads in. I don't know why.
I got them right away. Literally the next day that they turned them on, I got them right away, and it was just like, this is unacceptable.
Because when I was watching Invincible, I didn't get. Because when I was watching Invincible, I didn't get any ads.
Okay, see, and I don't think it was Invincible because I've been watching that too, but I think it might have been an old Top Gear or a movie. It was something, and it was just like, nope, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I just started watching Fallout, and that's another one. I'm just like, I couldn't. It would kill the pace of it if
and it does because they don't time it right or something.
It's always, not like It's not like it's made for TV where they specifically built in. Okay, this is a good stopping point for a break. They just randomly pick.
Cut it here.
Yeah.
How is Fallout, by the way?
So far, it's pretty good. I mean, I hadn't even finished. I always do this. My wife and daughter will leave, and the house is nice and quiet, and I can just sit and be comfortable and focus on something for an hour or two. And it never fails that I get sucked into something and then realize, oh man, I should have started watching that. And then, of course, I started watching it, and they got home like 10 minutes later. So I watched about half an hour of it, and it's incredible that it is true. It's alive. Now, I don't know how much of it is CGI, but it is like being in a vault. It's wild. It's like it's so accurate to the game. So
I've never actually played the game. So I was wondering whether it would still work for me as a piece of sci-fi.
I think it does, just because you don't necessarily, like, if you have played the games, there's a depth there that you'll appreciate, because that's what the service tunnels in those, what's what they look like. It's what the faucets look like. It's what the furniture looks like. It's like, it's all really true to the video game. But just as a sci-fi exercise, the idea that, there was a nuclear war and that people were living in a vault, like, it all still fits to that. And I don't think you would need to know, but I think you do get a little bit more if you happen to have that extra information.
So
I mean,
you can enjoy it whether you play the game or not. It's enjoyable.
So far. Now, I don't know if they're going to throw in anything that is, necessarily like very specific that you wouldn't understand otherwise. They seem to be doing a good job of like giving enough sort of background and exposition to kind of get you to understand what's happening. But also, again, it's the type of thing, because I know the story so well from playing pretty much all of them for, I don't know how many thousands of hours probably, but Fallout 4, I literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. That was such a deep game with so many different sidelines and stories, and a lot of it's world building, because that's kind of what Bethesda does. So it was just impressive to me to see how realistic in terms of what the game provided, how realistic this was. So
that's the thing about the
I think it's worth
the Halo game, or the Halo show. You could watch that show and you can just appreciate it for what it is. But when you have played the game, and especially if you've followed the games through the years, there's things about how these stories are playing out and why things are happening the way they are, that gives it a little bit more dimension than maybe you would have if you hadn't played the game. Which that's.
But I think they are doing a good job of not shutting people out that aren't part of the game fan base.
Was that true? Was that true of the Last of Us as well? Because I heard again lots of very good reviews about that, but again, it's a game I've not played, so I didn't go for it.
I've not seen that.
I have not watched it, but I plan to. And as far as I've heard the same thing, that you really don't need to, because really, the truth about video games is they'll have some story and world building usually as part of like the introduction to it, that type of thing. But once you start getting into the game, a lot of times you're learning through quests, through like the actual interaction with the game. Whereas, so really what that does is it makes it fairly easy for a movie or TV show to sort of communicate those things fairly quickly through just general storytelling. It's not, it doesn't have to be so granular and expressive. It can be sort of in generalities, like this is what's happening, that's what's happening. And the thing you have to be careful of is to not overdo it. Like it's just so overwhelmingly specific and nuanced and granular. It's okay, you're killing me here. But no, I think they've done a good job. I mean, it seems like in general they're doing a much better job today of translating video games to other types of media, live action, animation, stuff like that, than the laughable job that they did in the 80s and 90s. And, I just don't think they knew how to do it back then. And I think they've gotten much better at it now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point.
Yeah.
But nowadays they hire the people that actually know something about the storyline.
True.
Instead of
they don't have to. Yeah. Like you look at it, something like the old Mortal Kombat, and I mean, Mortal Kombat never really had a world so much to begin with. I mean, it was kind of a, the idea is that these odd characters are fighting, so they had to sort of create this world, but like the old Mario Brothers versus the new one, that kind of thing. So anyway, so yes, back to Majid's point of me being a patient. I'm feeling a lot stronger, and I have much less pain from the surgery that I had about 6 weeks ago now. So during that 6 weeks, well, basically a month, I was mostly in bed, and so I wasn't sitting and using a computer. I don't really love using a laptop on my lap, as sort of, contradictory as that might sound, but it's not really comfortable for me. And so I just ended up using Android devices the whole time, my tablet, my phone, that kind of thing. And so it was interesting to get back to using the form factor of a computer with, a keyboard, a mouse, a full operating system, that kind of thing. So, and it was mostly good. And I'm saying mostly because I had to deal with some deferred maintenance on both the laptop and the tablet PC that I have, which are the two systems I primarily use. I have a desktop as well, but it's kind of a process machine. I tend to just kick things off and let it grind away instead of like sitting in front of it. So the technical debt on the tablet is that it had been running Fedora 38 workstation, the GNOME edition, and that was probably for about 5 months total. The first 3 months or so, maybe even close to 4, it was fine. It ran. Actually, I was surprised at how well it ran considering the age of the device, the fact that it's a small form factor and the thermals and sort of all the things you have to, the trade-offs you make in having a thin and small portable device. So, but after that point, it got really slow, like where it felt like maybe the drive was failing, or like there was just some fundamental issue where every application I opened took 30 seconds or more to open. Saving a file was taking forever. If it seemed like the system, like as if the CPU was pegged or something, and that's how it was behaving, like just really slow refreshes and stuff. But it wasn't. I mean, the CPU was fine. The device wasn't hot. The fans weren't running. Like it was, even the battery performance was poor. So I did the basic stuff you would do to check on what processes were running and, what was happening. Did some benchmarks and everything, seemed fine, but it was just running really slowly. So I had to do a distro review for Distro Hoppers Digest anyway. And I also had never run KDE Plasma on here. And since Plasma 6 had just been released, I thought, this will be a good opportunity to switch over from Fedora to, and in this case, I picked Neon, since it was sort of the easiest, most direct way to get Plasma 6. And so I used the Neon User Edition, installed it, and I'm not going to go into specifics here because I talked about it on Distro Hoppers Digest episode 51, so you can go listen to my full experience there. But suffice to say, at the end of that, I wasn't really enamored with the way that Neon worked. I just kind of felt like it wasn't a good fit for what I was doing. Not that there's anything wrong with Neon. It's a pretty bare bones distro by design, right? But I kind of thought Plasma was interesting. It was a little disappointing. I thought 6 was going to be something that it isn't. But that was more managing expectation on my part and not the Plasma team. I think they did a good job. But anyway. So what I ended up doing instead was I wanted to go back to GNOME because on a touchscreen, GNOME really is like sort of the best solution in terms of being able to just use a device as a tablet. From, just the interface itself is just all built around that. It's just so easy to sort of use it. There's gesture support built in, so you can call up screens and overviews and menus, and it's just really the easiest one that I've found. And so I wanted to run GNOME again, but I didn't want to run an Ubuntu base, so I picked Arch. And I had used Arch for a long time, many years ago, but I think that was when I was a younger man who was much more interested in just using a computer and learning and, really sort of diving into Linux and enjoying troubleshooting and all this sort of things that I had to deal with. But now I'm a very lazy person by comparison, and Arch just does a lot of extra work that you don't normally have to deal with when you're using other distros that are sort of turnkey. So for example, Arch will have, depending on how you install it, will have Bluetooth installed, but they don't enable the service. So you try to use it and it doesn't work and you don't know why, and you have to just go figure out, okay, it's because it's not enabled. So you enable it, okay, no big deal, but then it's not configured the way you expect it to, so it doesn't behave the way that you expect it to. So you have to do more effort around getting Bluetooth the way you expect it to work. And an hour later, then you figure out, oh, well, I'm not in, the sudo group, right? My bash configuration isn't the way I expect it to be. The fonts that I would expect to be here aren't here. Like death by 1,000 paper cuts type of situation. Again, for someone like me who's just wants to install it and get up and running. So this is not a knock on Arch. Like I said, I was an Arch user for a very long time, and I enjoyed using it because you have so much control.
I have to admit that the whole not enabling the services when you install a package, and they seem to think that that's a selling point. Like, well, we don't make any assumptions about the user. Well, I think you can safely make the assumption that if somebody installs a package, they're going to want to use it. So enable the services because not everybody's going to know what the name of the service is to enable it. So this is something I've thought about for years. Like that's something they probably ought to lighten up on, honestly. Or they need to make a tool that you can just add a hook to Pac-Man that will activate all the services when you install.
Right, another flag or something that'll just So again, I can't criticize it. I love that they've taken a stance. There is an Arch way, and that is the way. And again, it has taught me a lot. Between just running Arch and then the Arch wiki, I've learned that's probably 85% of my knowledge base for Linux because it's such a well-rounded and complete resource. And the overwhelmingly positive thing I can say, which has always been true, is that Arch feels very lean and fast compared to something like Ubuntu or Fedora or anything else. It's just fast because it doesn't have a bunch of extra stuff running unless you choose to. And of course, if you then install a bunch of stuff and have a bunch of services running and all that stuff, then it becomes just like anything else. And so I kind of get it. It's just a different way of looking at it. Instead of being subtractive, like you're installing something monolithic and taking away, it's additive. You're installing something small and lean and then adding to it, depending on what you need. So just a different philosophy than the one that sort of suits me right now. So that was that system. Go ahead.
Can I just ask? Sorry, I was just going to ask a quick question. I remember you saying how well Fedora had been working on that machine. Do you know why it had become so slow?
No, and that's what I'm saying. I did, all the basic tests. I sort of checked what was running, what was starting up, what was enabled. Is there something that is drawing extra power from the CPU? Is it, a memory issue? Is it? And the other true test was to just boot into a different copy of Linux and see that there was literally no issue whatsoever. So it had to be that instance of Fedora. It was nothing that was readily apparent.
Sounds like an IO scheduler or something like that.
Yeah, just something weird.
Did Fedora randomly switch you from X to Wayland or something?
No, it had been Wayland the whole time, which is why I was enjoying it because it was 38 workstation, GNOME, Wayland. This is an Intel chip in here, and it all was just flawless. Like there was no issue at all. Like it just worked perfectly for like I said, 3-4 months, and then it just kind of decided not to. And I put in as much time as I was willing to. And then again, like I said, it was convenient because I needed to test something for Distro Hoppers Digest. And so I'm sure it would have been more helpful maybe to try to track it down and then give that feedback to the Fedora devs. But, I didn't do that. So anyway, so now that's the state of this system. That's what I'm using right now. It's Arch with GNOME. I'm having all kinds of annoyances with different things that are working and not working. And so I'm probably going to try, I'm going to stick with GNOME on this system because of the touch aspect, but I'm not sure which distro I'm going to use. And for all I know, I'll just stay with Arch and just fix the things that annoy me and and just stop complaining. But anyway, so the other machine is my Dell XPS 15 laptop. It has been running Linux Mint for well over a year. I've actually upgraded, I think, twice already. And it runs great. I love Cinnamon. I love Mint. I love all how it works and everything. But somehow, when I installed that instance, I picked Btrfs and some kind of like home directory encryption that I have literally no understanding of, and I've been trying to figure out because I'm getting low disk space warnings. And I've, again, just like diagnosing Fedora, like I've spent several hours just trying to figure it out, and I'm not figuring it out. Like I've removed all the large files. I've, done as much as I can, but there's still some sort of like a configuration thing that is stopping me from being able to sort of figure it out and get it fixed. I don't have to wipe it yet because I still have enough space that it's still functioning properly, and all of my data is on a secondary drive, so it's really just the root partition. And I'll spend a little more time looking at it, and hopefully, if anyone has any suggestions, maybe they can give me a hand. But if I can't figure it out,
it might not understand fully. If it's Btrfs and it's warning you about a full file system, if it's a tool that's not necessarily made for Btrfs, Btrfs can sometimes report that blocks are being used when they're simply allocated. And so you might want to like look up the commands to see how much file space you're actually using using a Btrfs tool, and then decide what to do from there, because I think that's probably more than likely the trouble you're running into.
So the weird thing is, so it's two layers of issues. So one is Btrfs, and you're right, and I did look through kind of like pruning and freeing up whatever with volumes and subvolumes and all that stuff. So that's sort of one layer to it. The other is encryptfs, and that it's the weirdest thing. I look, and I can't remember the folder structure from memory at this point, but there's like all of my files are actually somewhere else in like an encrypted state, and like so it makes it look like there's two copies of things, and it's just, I don't understand how it works. So it's confusing to look at. I've looked up all this stuff and just tried to find a straightforward answer, and I swear, like there's just no like, okay, I installed it this way, so that means that leaves me in this state, and I've got this configuration going on, so here are the things that you can try. Like, I'd like to think I'm fairly resourceful.
None of the traditional tools will work once you go outside of the ordinary like that. You got to stop.
Nope.
Listening to what
none of the reporting tools on disk space usage and like
because
that
it's
stuff
also
just isn't.
It also, if you do snapshots, it might be also reading the snapshot as a complete volume as well.
Yeah.
And which, I mean, that doubles the size that you're using right there.
Yeah, and admittedly, I just don't understand Btrfs very well, and my situation, like I just don't really necessarily need that level of complexity, so I've just kind of stuck with ext4, not had any issues with it. So I don't know. And the other thing is, I don't tend to keep a Linux install for too long. Like when I hear people saying, "Oh, I've been running the same instance for 5 years," it's like, I do so much experimentation with weird software and installing and removing, and I just end up with all this extra junk that I don't need. And sometimes for me, I just feel like starting fresh is a decent thing. So we'll see if I can fix it just to have the knowledge of what happened and how to work with it. Great. If not, I'm just gonna wipe it and get on with my life. So I have one last thing, and I have the question of why is it that Android Bluetooth is basically flawless, right? Works every time. Never have a problem with it. And Linux Bluetooth is barely functional on a good day. Now that's a rhetorical question. I don't expect an answer to that because, but I just basically wanted a chance. Well, I just wanted a chance to whine about it. So
no, because this has always been one of my major complaints with Linux and Bluetooth. But recently, because of the plethora of devices that I have now, I've noticed something. Some of my Linux devices, now most of them are really horrible with Bluetooth. Some of them, however, are actually really good. So I think it might be a chipset thing, like the actual hardware that you're using to control your Bluetooth. So like on my 1GX, Bluetooth works flawlessly. But then on my Latitude, it sucks. On my MSI, it sucks. On my desktop, It's somewhat dependent on what USB adapter I'm using, but mostly it sucks. So yeah,
Yeah,
more
and
research required.
this is probably, the less popular thing to do, but I've got on this system specifically, the Latitude tablet still has Windows 11, and I can dual boot. I don't ever use it, but when I'm trying to troubleshoot, especially a hardware thing, so I was having a trouble with, and this is a known thing. If you dual boot with Bluetooth, the devices tend to have a different MAC address, and so when the device sees, like, when, let's say, Windows boots up and is looking for my mouse, it's looking for a specific Mac that my mouse is now changed to something else. And so I get that. Like, that makes sense. It's annoying, but I get that. Like, why this
You
doesn't
have
just
to
keep the
repair it
same
every
one.
time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, or what Arch is doing right now, which other distros don't do, is my Bluetooth earbuds. Like, if I'm on Mint on my laptop, when I start up and log in, if I have them on, they'll just automatically connect. No drama, no nothing. Whereas this, if I go to the tray and I click connect for them, they will connect. Now my mouse, it won't, because that's a Logitech thing. Like, apparently they add one to the end of whatever. But yeah, for some reason it'll connect or not connect. In some cases, I have to unpair, repair. And yeah, the gist was basically none of that exists on Android. Like, I literally have paired all of my devices one time, in some cases years ago. And sometimes I may have to, the device itself, I have to put in pairing mode to get it to be free from whatever previous connection it was on. But it's never the device. It's always the Bluetooth device, not the Android device. So I don't know. I understand Bluetooth is complicated, and like you said, Joe, there's lots of different radios and hardware involved and all that stuff. And then when you have Logitech, iterating their Macs by one every time for who knows why, it's not easy. But it's just something you notice, because I came back to using the computers and immediately was like, what am I doing? Like, why is this not working?
I gave up on Bluetooth
Anyway.
on everything on Linux, unfortunately.
Oh, I know.
Because I was trying to use a Bluetooth mouse just to make one less dongle that I've got to have on my laptop, sticking out.
Yeah.
And eventually I just gave it. They're actually Logitech is making those dongles now so thin to where they're actually hard to grab and pull out now. The new ones, so it's fine. Whatever. It just got to be. Sometimes you'd start the computer up and it would connect. Sometimes it wouldn't, and it's just because the laptop I've got, the touchpad is just garbage, and that's all you're left with when you can't connect the mouse. And so I just gave up completely. But you're right. My phone is paired to the car stereo in my pickup truck, the car stereo in my semi truck, 2 pairs of headsets, and one other thing upstairs in the house, and it just connects to those without fail 100% of the time.
I actually use a Bluetooth mouse with my S24 Ultra, and I have zero problems. Every time.
You get some piece of crap like when I'm using the Samsung Dex to watch TV in my truck. I got one of those piece of crap Bluetooth remote controls, so I could sit there, kick back and watch TV with this remote control connected to my phone, and that works 100% of the time. But I can't even connect a mouse to my $1,300 laptop without it saying, device not detected. Okay. Yeah, you're going on the railroad tracks behind the house.
Anyway, I have the luxury of a voice on a podcast, and that was my way of being able to annoy or get that out of my system.
Oh, yeah. You are not alone in that whatsoever.
All right. Well, I think we've beaten that one down a little bit, so let's go ahead and move on.
A couple hours in, and we're finally to the innards.
Yes. All right. Well, we have arrived at the innards, and this week we are discussing migrating Pi-hole and WireGuard to an x86 64 system. So who owns this one?
That's me.
All right, take it away, Joe.
Well, actually, just before Joe starts, can I ask a quick question just for the noobs like me? Why should I even have a Pi-hole? What's the point?
Okay, well, a Pi-hole is a DNS sinkhole, and basically it will provide you with network-wide ad blocking.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work against YouTube directly the way that uBlock Origin does, which is on your browser, but it will block most other ads. And sometimes you will have to, add sites or update. But you can also use it to control some of the websites that your kids go to. Like if they're spending too much time on manga sites instead of doing their homework, you can block said manga site really easily.
It's such a niche way of putting it that I can only assume that's actually happened to you.
Multiple times, yes. And fanfic sites, and multiple fanfic sites that I have had to block in order to get my kids to do homework.
It's just the best way to block ads on the network level,
Yes.
without any abstraction running on the device whatsoever. And you don't have to do it network wide. You can set it up and then only have specific devices point towards it, because that's how it works here. I can't run it network wide because then my wife won't be able to play her stupid little games where she has to watch an ad to go further on the game.
Oh my goodness.
That sounds like a problem for somebody that's not me.
The minute I had mine set up and filtering, my wife was messaging me, I'm trying to load an ad for a clothing store from my email and it's saying it can't be reached.
Yes.
And I'm just like, oh.
It also means that when you use the Google search, the top two search results won't work either, because those are all ad based. So
yeah, the Google AdSense stuff that's blocked. Now the only problem that I've had is a couple of the Chinese sites that I'd like to at least see the prices on, like what is it, Alibaba or AliExpress, are blocked.
So I don't want to start this off and make it sound like it's either overly complicated or too difficult. Really, all of this comes down to the block lists that you choose to use.
Yeah.
And you can use ones that are fairly permissive and just will block either malware or porn or really nasty stuff that you don't want no one in the house has an excuse to ever see. So it's, you can be that sort of judicious with it, or you can, install every block list and then basically have a very narrow set of sites that would pass through it. So it's not Pi-hole's fault if we're complaining about these specific instances. It's because of the way we have it configured. So.
And and to be fair,
AliExpress if
I was just going to say, I could have sat and watched everything that was getting blocked, and I could have whitelisted everything that my wife's phone was doing, but that is something that you would have to constantly do. So I don't mess with it. But that's the usefulness of it, Majid. It's a little faster than doing it through the browser because there's no software running that's looking at it and then blocking it. So.
Oh man, we got sidetracked before we even got started.
Right on. Let's get to it.
All right. So this innards, like we were saying, is about me migrating away from the Pi0W for my DNS sinkhole and my WireGuard setup. Now, the reason I decided to do this, because the Pi0 was working just fine, is because the 0W is over Wi-Fi, and the WireGuard setup was only getting like 10 Mbps max. So yes, it's over Wi-Fi, and I thought it would do better wired. Now, I had a Gigabyte Bricks GB BX AB 5545 mini PC that was just sitting around doing nothing, and I figured that I might as well put it to use and maybe also use it as a set-top box and get back my Dell Latitude that needs a new screen, because yes, I have two Dell Latitudes. Also, with the bricks being wired, I should get much faster speeds on the WireGuard setup. This will also allow me to free up that Pi for a future project. So the first thing that I did was try to find my Ventoy stick that had Mint already on it. No such luck. However, I did find a couple other USB sticks that I had sitting around, So I decided to make another Ventoy stick. And I'll tell you, a lot of this I made a lot harder than it needed to be, and there were a lot of problems, and that's what this is mostly about. The problems I came across and getting it done correctly. Now, I had gone through this process recently before, so I knew I had a good copy of Ventoy and a good copy of Mint. Should be an easy process, right? Well, the first stick that I made kept coming up with an error about needing to load the kernel first after it had gone through the Ventoy screen. And I was trying to bring up that live version of Mint. So I pulled out the second stick because when I did an internet search, it said it was a bad drive. So I decided I put it on the second stick, and the exact same thing was happening. So I decided to try a couple of things at the same time to isolate the problem. I started downloading a new copy of Ventoy and a new copy of Mint, even though my research said it was probably an issue with USB sticks. I decided to just image one of them straight with Mint and see how things worked out. Research at this time while I was working on this device was pretty easy because I was in my garage and I was using that lovely portable monitor attached to my chair that I got for Christmas and a USB switcher that I use for work to move the mouse and keyboard back and forth between the two devices. Well, the bare bones install of the exact same copy of Mint on the USB stick worked fine, and I was able to install it just like you normally would. Okay, next up, I would install OpenSSH so that I can access everything externally. And while I'm at it, I install X2Go Server so that I can work on a bigger screen if needed, and I can hook back up the work computer to the mouse and keyboard. Next up, Pi-hole, which from my readings can be installed on x86. Turns out you can install it, but it looks for the OS that you are running, and it really only wants to install on Ubuntu or the Pi. But you can tell it to skip the OS check in the install by using, Pi-hole _ skip OS _ check equals true in the command that you use to curl and install it. Now, normally I would be a bit paranoid about running things from a script, but this one is well known and I don't have any concerns about it. It installs just the way that it does on the Pi, and the only real thing of note is picking the external DNS, which, I chose AdGuard, so that I have a bit of redundancy. Everything worked with the Pi-hole pretty easy, and I was able to get the Pi-hole interface up easy enough. But that was all that I checked at the time and did not verify that it was actually working because I wanted to move on to the next step. Next up, WireGuard. Now, I kind of figured that it would be the same process as Pi-hole and that I would be able to just run the Pi script to get it working, probably having to pass the skip OS command again, but that did not work, and so now, it is supposed to be installable on an x86 system, but once again, it only wants to be Ubuntu. So I moved on and found something called WireGuard Manager. It really did make things simple. It's very similar to the WireGuard Pi script. As a matter of fact, it made things so simple that I kind of breezed through the install. I did notice that it had its own ad blocker, and I kind of figured I would try it out and have a bit more redundancy in regards to, my phone connecting and having ad blocking. This turned out to be a mistake. Now, I was able to connect the WireGuard instance, but I had no network. Like, I connected on my phone, it said I was connected from what I could see, and then I would go to do a speed test, and it would say I can't find any network. I tried to go to a web page, and nothing worked. Now, my first assumption is that something was wrong with the Pi-hole setup. I take a closer look at the interface, and I could see a couple of errors. There was a problem with port 53. Pi-hole could not connect to anything because something else was using that port. Now, the first thing I tried was simply changing the port inside Pi-hole to 54, and that worked, but it did not find the problem, and there was still no internet on the client side. I started checking what was using the port 53 using the command ss tech tulpn space sport equals 53. Turns out it was an application called Unbound, which was installed when I added the ad blocking for WireGuard. Now, the easiest solution was to use the WireGuard Manager script to uninstall, and then reinstall without the added ad blocking. This still did not fix the client. Still looked like it connected, but no internet. Now, Pi-hole had an error with the PHP as well, but that was really easily resolved with a service restart. So I started looking elsewhere for the issue. By that point, I had done several hours worth of searching on the Pi-hole forums on various things to try, but nothing seemed to work. I almost said to heck with it and installed Ubuntu to see if that was an issue, to see if it was an overall issue with Mint, but I decided to take a look at the client again first, my phone. Sure enough, I went into the logs on my phone and it was showing a handshake error over and over again, even though the WireGuard application was not showing an error whatsoever. It was finding the server but could not complete the handshake, and the application was redirecting traffic into nothing. So I wasn't receiving any alerts on my phone. I wasn't receiving anything on my phone. Well, me being an idiot sometimes, I had remembered to forward my port on my router, but I forgot that it needed to be UDP instead of TCP. So, yeah, basically I had trouble on every step of the process, and it all turned out to be a major issue between the keyboard and the chair. But when finished, I was able to compare the two WireGuard setups with the bricks, which is set up in my garage right now. I will be moving it to the living room, but on 100 Mbps connection, and I was able to provide the whole 100 Mbps up and down from a remote location, and the Pi was only giving 10. So it was well worth the hassle, in my opinion. But oh wait, I didn't stop there. I decided to install a full instance of my Nextcloud on the device as a full-time backup, since the one on the 1GX doesn't get turned on all the time. I had a 1 terabyte external hard drive sitting around not doing anything anyway, so I hooked that up. But I decided to do it from X to Go while using my main computer. Now, this was a hassle all in itself. I tried Cinnamon because, that was already installed on the bricks, but no taskbar at the bottom. I mean, it came up the first time, but no taskbar, couldn't do anything. You hit the start button and nothing happens. I had gone through this process before on some other machines that I use remotely, and the solution for those was KDE. But on the bricks, it won't even load. Same with Mate. Just gets an error, says the command didn't work. I'd have to figure out what the custom command would be in order to get those to launch. So I just moved on. Now, I installed LXDE as well. LXDE worked, and it worked pretty well. Now, I have my issues with the base install of LXDE. I don't like the menus, but it gets the job done in this instance. I did a Flatpak install of Nextcloud, and I added it to the startup. Now, you attach the hard drive and set up the auto mount, and then you have to unmount the drive, create the mount folder, and change the permissions. Then auto mount, mount space tac A or sudo mount space tac A, and make sure that it's in the correct spot. Back to Nextcloud to put in the user info, set the storage location, and let it do its thing. Restart to test, and everything works and syncs with no issues. I have a full backup of my Nextcloud on something that will be up and running all the time. So now I've done all this work and everything is going great. The DNS sinkhole works, the WireGuard works, and is brilliantly fast. My Nextcloud is properly redundant, and the first thing that goes through my head is, I should migrate this to the Dell Latitude that is hooked up in my living room. Roughly the same power, if not a bit more, and the power consumption would probably be significantly less. The next thing I thought to myself was, shut the hell up, you! And that was really quick innards.
So what made you decide to go this route on x86 and not like a Docker container or something like that?
What? Well, I still wanted a separate machine. I want to be able to hook it up in the living room directly to the router instead of having it on my computer in the garage. I needed a separate system also for the Nextcloud, and I needed something that was connected wired as opposed to wireless, the way the Pi Zero is.
Okay.
Do you have a system that just runs, like if you have like a, I don't know, Jellyfin server, or like do you just have a system that's running different services? Or
my server in the garage, my desktop / server out in the garage is running my Plex, my audio bookshelf, my main instance of Nextcloud, and probably a couple other things that I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I've always heard of people running it on Pi hole on a Pi, or some small SBC versus as a container. Although I don't see why it wouldn't work as a container. I mean,
There
guess
are
it's your
Docker
preference,
images.
maybe.
Yeah, there are
Mm.
Docker images, so you could run it directly.
There's an
from
official
a
Docker image, yeah.
But yeah, an official Docker image. And I could have done that with probably WireGuard as well, but it seemed like more of a setup, and I'll just do it this way. And I do have Nextcloud running as a Docker image on my computer in the garage, but I chose the Flatpak here just because it's a little bit simpler on the install.
So it was easier with Flatpak to get that set up.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Did it seem like there was a ton of like prerequisite stuff that it had to pull for it? Or?
No, that's the great thing about a Flatpak, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, not polluting.
I know I asked you this on Discord before. Now, do you have your WireGuard presumably set up to where you can connect to it from outside your home with a mobile device or whatever? What are you? Are you using a static IP
I'm using
address?
a dynamic DNS.
Okay.
It's built into my Asus router.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's the router I had. Well, this one's got it built into, but I don't use it that way just because usually they'll give you the choice of a couple of different dynamic DNS services. And for those of you that don't know, anytime you want to make anything accessible to the outside world, you have to either make your external IP address static, meaning that it never changes because it does change otherwise, or you have to use a dynamic DNS service, which updates the DNS, which is basically the yellow pages for the internet, to run a script about it once every 10 minutes or so that updates the DNS for your whatever your router is. And
that brings up an interesting thing. Like for me, I don't pay for my dynamic DNS. So like I said, it comes directly from Asus. So you know the last portion of it is like asuscom.com, and then the first part of it is what I get to pick. So that's absolutely free. But that does remind me that like with the WireGuard manager, it generates a QR code that you use to get all the client side information onto your device. And so I did that. But then I have to go in on my Android device and manually adjust that to not have my IP address, but to have my dynamic DNS address.
Now, I think I remember when I was setting up WireGuard on mine, it actually asked me if I wanted to set up the domain name at the time for the WireGuard, and I was able to do that. So I don't have to change it on the device periodically. And as far as dynamic DNS goes, if your device doesn't come with it for free or what have you, there's a service out there called Duck DNS, where you can get an A record from them for free. So you would have I don't know, bill.duckdns.net as basically your domain name, and then that there's something you got to get from GitHub and install it, but big deal. And then it runs a script to update your DNS. So then that's like a free of charge, completely reliable method for exposing any service, whether it's like a Jellyfin or WireGuard. WireGuard's probably the best way to go, because once you've got WireGuard, you're tunneled into your home network, and then you've got, that's your DNS now. So your wireless device is using your Pi hole for the DNS. So you've got all the same advantages of the ad blocking on your phone or tablet or whatever out on the go as you would at home.
Right.
Because
now, if you're looking for an easier way to do all of this, not the WireGuard, but simply the ad blocking, then you could just add the AdGuard DNS to your router and call it a day. But I will say that WireGuard is still difficult to set up if you're not using one of these scripts. So I highly recommend using one of these scripts, like WireGuard Manager. It made the process extremely simple. And WireGuard is significantly faster and has a lot less overhead than something like OpenVPN.
It's
And
almost
it's
like
Yeah.
you
just as
can
secure.
you can leave it open all the time on a wireless device, and it uses
Yeah.
no more battery life or anything, and it just basically keeps you connected to your home network all the time. And then if you're using the Pi hole, you've got all the advantages of that. Like I said, now as far as like what Joe was saying, it's easier to use with scripts. A lot of it has to do with you really need to understand the concept of um, pre-shared keys and this whole concept of a public key and a private key, like with GPG and all
SSH.
that. It helps to understand that concept before you start messing around with WireGuard manually, because you are creating a dynamic, or not a dynamic, a key pair is what they call it, where you've got a private key and a public key on both sides. You need to understand how that works before you set this up manually, but the scripts take all that away, because that's
Yeah.
kind of how it works.
I honestly, so I've played with hosting my own VPN server, like out in the cloud, and then connecting to it and using that just for a certain amount of anonymity. And I actually was playing. These statements aren't directly connected, but it sort of led me to Tailscale, which is based off of WireGuard, but is sort of like a zero config, um, method of connecting your systems, and then having that persistent WireGuard connection that also doesn't require punching a hole in your router and forwarding ports and stuff like that. And I think if I was going to set up a Nextcloud server or something that I had to connect to externally, that I would probably use something like that. Now, the difference being that, of course, you have to have that. I think you have to have Tailscale installed, but you'd have to have WireGuard installed too. So I guess the advantage of Tailscale is that it's just easier to set up with, but you're using a third-party company, and so it's not
That's really
directly under
the
your
only
control.
thing, is that you are, instead of just using bare bones WireGuard, which is basically just a technology that is, I don't know, for all intents and purposes, will last forever. Tailscale, and now I've never used it, but I know people rave on it, because you're right. The advantage is you don't have to poke holes in your firewall, whereas you do with WireGuard. You got to open up that one port that WireGuard needs to come through. Tailscale gets around that somehow.
Yeah, there was one, like Zero Tier, I think, is another one, but there are ways to set up the same sort of system and configuration as Tailscale, but you host and control the
Yeah,
you set it up yourself. So the advantage of Tailscale is that the only thing they do is they have the DNS component of knowing what a host name is and then how to sort of route that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the the secret sauce that they're providing, and then also the NAT transversal and all that stuff. But there is an open source project that gives you the same tool set and the same ability, but you have to configure it and do a little bit more work. But yeah, and so there are ways to do that. But I agree with you. I think that's always sort of the big question, is like, what am I handing over to a company whenever I'm using their service? According to them, everything is sort of, encrypted between nodes, and they can't see anything except for the host name stuff. And
Right.
so,
Well, like
know.
you were saying, I've considered setting this up on like a droplet or, some other remote service that I could access. And then, it wouldn't be dependent on my house having power, et cetera, et cetera. But my only issue with that is that once again, I would be severely limiting my speed because most of those places, unless you're paying a lot extra, are only offering like a 2 to 3 meg connection.
Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely saw that myself when I was trying to run my own, and it was not WireGuard at that point. It was OpenVPN, so it was pretty pretty pokey, no doubt. Question about AdGuard: is that something you guys use? Because I use Cloudflare in some cases, and it looks like AdGuard kind of provides a similar set of capabilities.
Yeah, you just use it as your DNS, right? That's how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of 1.1.1.1 or whatever,
Right.
they have a different set of them.
I wonder how fast they are. That would be the only thing with me, because
Yeah.
You can count on Cloudflare just always being fast and reliable, and
Right.
I haven't noticed
Yeah,
any
and
slowdown, but I've also only recently started using them. So
Okay. Do you use the default or the filtering servers?
I think I use their filtering servers.
Okay.
I'd have to go and look at my numbers again.
because you can
My
add
VPN
so many
provider-
lists to a pie hole. There's a
Right.
surprising number of
Oh yeah.
lists out there that you can get.
Yeah, if you go on Reddit and just start looking at the lists that other people use,
Oh yeah,
it's insane. Just
some
the
people take it
different
really
people that are
seriously.
posting lists, and you can
Yeah.
pick your level of security with those lists, from completely paranoid to, somewhat permissive. Let's just
Mhm.
block the simple ads and stuff like that. And yeah, give it some research. Pick and choose.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I tend to do. I mean, performance is important because you'll notice a DNS lag in that translation if it's slow. So that I've used other services that were, I guess, more private, if you want to say it that way, but they were not as performant, and so that sort of pushed me towards Cloudflare, which Cloudflare gets enough data off the world's networks to begin with. So if AdGuard's a better choice, I don't know. Cool. All right. Well, I'm curious to see how that runs for you.
Well, I
in the
used to use
future,
Cloudflare, and if AdGuard doesn't work out for me, then I'll be switching back to Cloudflare. But I also don't know, how much I'll notice between it and having my own DNS sinkhole there. So
Yeah.
So you're saying you've got the
All
pie
right.
hole set up, and then you've got pie hole looking to Adware
right.
as the backup DNS. So you've got both.
Well, no.
Really?
No. Okay. See, Pi-hole blocks specific DNSs using
Right.
its DNS list, and using its block list, and then it reaches out to a public DNS in
Correct.
order to be able to connect to all the different websites. You can pick that public DNS.
Yes. Right.
So you could pick Cloudflare, you can pick Google, you can pick, in my case, AdGuard.
AdGuard.
So that's what I do. So I have my DNS sinkhole, which is blocking things, and then which blocks its own things on its list, and then it goes out to AdGuard as its public DNS.
So you're getting the benefit of both of them, actually, when you're doing it that way.
I should be, yes.
Yeah. Well, good.
Yeah. It is good stuff. And
You'll have to keep
I would
us...
say for self-hosting,
Yeah.
for self-hosting, Pi-hole, I think, is a good place for people to start. It teaches you so much about your network, your local network in your house, and how to set up some basic things around, networking. And it's kind of fairly low risk. I mean, I think maybe you could potentially open too many ports. I don't think so, though. I mean, if you follow the instructions, it's pretty straightforward. And the neat thing is that you then have an amount of control over the traffic if you have like kids or, just, I'll tell you another huge benefit of Pi-hole is for all of the sort of IoT devices or things like Roku's or smart televisions. those things are continuously phoning home and pinging back to the, servers. Like a Roku, so Pi-hole has a graphical, like a UI that you load. It's a web-based interface management console, and it shows you statistics, like, how many requests were there in total and how many were blocked. And then it'll show you a list of like the top blocked domains and the number of blocks there were. And always for me, Roku, like 80% of the block traffic on my network was Roku trying to call home, sending who knows what. But, so those types of devices, if you have those types of things and you're not sure like what they're doing, that's kind of an interesting way to see how chatty they are and how often they're sending things back to the mothership, so to speak.
It's actually a lot with these devices. It's pretty gross. If you sit there and you watch that admin
leave
panel.
it sit there for even a couple of hours, and you not even doing anything on your own, and you will just see how many things got blocked. How many
thousands,
ads?
Thousands, yeah, yep. So, anyway, it's a cool project. It's and it's worth doing if you've never tried anything like that. So, all right, I think we'll move on. All right, vibrations from the ether. Joe and I talked about this yesterday. We had someone send an email. Joe, do you want to talk about it, or I'm happy to do it?
I'll let you read the email, but I'm gonna mention that Sun Fun is a longtime listener, and he's also the person that sent me the Pine phone to test out on, that I still, occasionally test out distros on and do various things on to see how well it's working, to see if it's daily driver ready. And I need to talk to the rest of the team because I think it's about time that I send that on to another person. But I definitely want to say thank you, Sun Fun, for sending that to me, for being a longtime listener, and also for providing your insight on this XZ issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So he had sent us an email last week, I think, maybe a little longer. But so, like Joe said, Sun Fun sent us an email stating Security Now just covered the extreme malicious Linux developer vulnerability that he says he has been repeatedly mentioned to numerous Linux podcasts over the last 15 years. So he's seen the writing on the wall for this one for a long time. The Linux community is either apathetic, stumped, or just bewildered on how to fix this. Security Now, which is a podcast, what is that? Leo Laporte, and I forget the guy's name that doesn't. Anyway, it's a pretty well-known podcast if you've never heard of it, but they just implied the problem is that the Linux community simply tests new software via encrypted or zipped submissions, and that they can't see the malicious behavior. My question has always been, what is stopping someone from just submitting a malicious update, then reverting it in a few days to avoid detection? Answer from the Linux community, total silence, crickets. My long-standing recommendation, at least save all the revisions to have a chance of back auditing them to see what was installed. Answer from the Linux community, total silence, crickets. Here's the Security Now YouTube video start time code mentioning this yesterday, and he sends along a link, which will be in the show notes. But this isn't something that was necessarily directed at us. It was something that he just feels frustrated because he has mentioned this, he's been mentioning it, and it doesn't seem like there has been any kind of a response or answer to, how do you deal with the situation where someone is playing a long con, right? They're taking their time to infiltrate. They are submitting good updates that pass everything, that are doing what they intend. There was no malicious content, all with the intent of gaining trust. And in this case, with the XZ vulnerability, having these puppet accounts, getting him promoted to have the ability to package and have higher access, so that then he could do exactly what Sun Fun says, which is slip something in, revert it, but it's out there. So and again, this is nothing that any of us really have any ability to do much about, other than to, publicize it, and hopefully this situation is something that can continue to happen without some sort of a solution. And to his point, if this is a possibility, and it's not only a possibility, but it's now actually happened, there has to be some measured way of, you know, vetting people, of actually, maybe just a close to zero trust policy where it's like, yes, maybe you've been a contributor for a long time, but we can't just assume that you haven't been corrupted in some way, or that you've not been conning us all along. And then I've heard a lot of people talk about, well, how hard it would be to find out who the developer is and break in when they're not home and steal their equipment, or even kidnap them, or something more nefarious. But the point exists that we do sort of take it on faith that software is being produced, vetted, tested, and then by time we have access to it, that there's a reasonable amount of confidence that nothing, nefarious is going on. But I think we've sort of had our eyes open to a different angle on this. So what were you going to say, Joe?
Oh no, I agree with you. This is definitely a difficult thing to, implement, this level of security. Plus, that level of security would probably also slow things down. Not that that is necessarily a bad thing, but it is a lot of extra work, and we kind of know these risks when we're dealing with open source. But yeah, I have to agree that with Sun Fun, that this is a possibility and it should be known, and hopefully we can find a way to mitigate that issue.
Well, I think I'm actually thankful that this has happened, because I don't think many people have spent much time thinking about the human variable in all of this, where we think so much about, well, we got this process of vetting people, and then, the lead developer has to, if you submit a patch, it has to be accepted or whatever, and then all the things that go along with just something being open source to begin with. But how do we deal with things when the human factor gets involved, when you start doing social engineering to put the right person in place to make the nefarious decisions to put something in the code that shouldn't be there? Well, I mean, I think the answer before why there were so many crickets was that there just wasn't enough people considering this, and if they did, there was probably no meaningful solutions to be had. Whereas now we're going to think about it more now, and
Right.
the lesson here,
to it.
yeah, the lesson here, and in this case, and I really don't want to sound like I'm criticizing the original developer of the project, but if you're going to hand your project down, no matter how good or bad that process was, it's sort of incumbent upon you to have the due diligence to make sure you're passing this down to somebody who is going to be a good steward of the project, especially something this wide reaching and deeply rooted in pretty much every Linux system out there, But that's a human problem, and as long as human beings are somewhere in the process, in the mechanical process of software being developed, then there's going to be human problems that arise, and that probably should be the case. People need to understand that these tools that we use, these programs that we use, are made by human beings, and they are just as vulnerable to all of the mistakes and imperfections inherent to just being human. And you need to take that into account when you get online and pay your bills, or when you check your email, or when you're giving out your personal information online, or you're deciding the stuff you're going to save and where you're going to save it, So, I mean, there's safeguards you can put in place, but at the end of the day, we're only waiting for the next thing to come along, I think. I don't know. That's really all I've got to say about it.
Okay. Well, I thank Sun Fun again for sending that in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And encourage anyone who's listening that has any thoughts. We love hearing from you and would love to share your thoughts with everyone else. So please get in touch, and we'll get into that just after the next section. We have arrived at Check This Out, and up first is Bill with an update script for Arch.
Yeah, I've had this little script for years now. I wrote this and I slapped it onto GitHub. And in the beginning, all it really did was run a list of Pac-Man commands to update the system, and then an AUR command originally it was using YowArt, but then YowArt kind of went by the way of all things that are gone, and now it uses a tool called Yay. But only recently have I added the necessary if-then expressions to check and see if all of the necessary tools are installed. It'll check and see if you've got Reflector installed, which is a tool that Arch Systems will use to generate an optimized mirror list. And what it does is it goes and gets the five most recently updated mirror lists, and then it sorts them by speed, and then it checks to see if you've got Yay installed. Now, if you don't have any of these things installed along the way, it will install it for you. So it's a real quick and easy way if you are using an Arch-based system, and like if you're using Endeavor or Manjaro, it's going to come with all this stuff, and it's really not that necessary. But if you're using a bare bones Arch install, it's not going to come with Yay. They are philosophically opposed to adding AUR helpers, that is, programs that will interact with the AUR, install software from, and update directly from one tool. Their philosophy is that people should learn how to go and do that manually, and I agree. But once you've gotten past that learning process, this script is a good way to just go get the script and run it, and it gives you an updated system with first-class AUR support. And then also it goes and gets another program that's not installed by default anymore called Pac-Man Contrib, and that gives you the cache cleaning tools that you need to, it runs a couple commands to clean out your cache. Because the thing about Arch Linux is it keeps a cache of the packages you've got installed. It's in the var/cache/Pacman or something like that. And it's literally every package that's installed, and by default, it keeps the last 3 versions of every. So it's a sizable directory full of packages, and that's done for. It's probably not as necessary nowadays as it used to be, but it was done so that you had a quick and easy way to roll back if you have problems with a package, because Arch Linux is really, really fast in their update cadence. But it checks to make sure that you've got all those programs, and if you don't, it will install them for you and run the update one thing at a time, and then you'll have... Oh, and it updates the Flatpaks too, because Arch does... Interestingly, Arch comes with Flatpak support with FlatHub right out of the box, which I thought was an interesting thing for a distribution that doesn't even enable your systemd units by default. But yeah, there's a link in the show notes. I call the script Full Up. The link is to the GitHub page. You basically just download this thing and either put it in a directory that's in your path, what they call path, which is basically a directory that's recognized by your command shell as being a place that has executable scripts. That way, all you would have to do is type in full up on the terminal, and it would run the script. Now, you'll have to also mark the file as executable, otherwise you'll get nowhere. Or you could put it anywhere and then just open up a terminal in the directory that it's sitting in, and then just type period / and full up, and it'll run from there no matter where it's at. But yeah, if you're running an Arch-based system and you're irritated by all the separate little commands and the fragmented arguably method by which you have to update everything, then give my script a shot. One thing I would like to do, and I think it would be feature complete for the most part, is right now the reflector command, which is the command that generates the optimized mirror list. It's set to generate a mirror list for the US, which means what somebody like Majid living outside the US, you would have to edit that script to change the US to whatever the country code is. And I'd like to be able to add some sort of interaction expression to the script to ask the user what their locale is, and then maybe give them a list of available options that way, and then only have it do that once. I haven't learned how to do that yet, so that's kind of a to-do list thing for it. But other than that, it pretty much works the way it needs to.
Why don't you put this in an innards?
What's
you can
that?
Go over everything in it.
Well, it's Arch, I mean, how many people would...
I talk smack about Arch, but I'd still love to hear about this.
Okay, well, maybe I'll do that then. I'd really like to learn how to do that little thing, because I think like maybe half the people that would use this script would be in the US, and then everybody else would have to either have to edit it. And
the whole process of, generating a script for your own daily purposes. It's something I enjoy doing. It seems like something you evidently enjoy doing. I'd love to hear about it, and I'm sure some of our listeners at least would too.
And also, just as a side note, most of the way I learned how to do it was by watching LearnLinux.tv. He's got a whole tutorial series playlist out there. It's like 13 or 14 episodes. I can't remember. It's pretty long, and it's pretty comprehensive on how to write bash scripts, and he gets pretty involved in it. And by about halfway through, I had learned how to do the if-then expressions I needed to check and see if things were installed, and I haven't gotten much further than that. So maybe as I get further along with those tutorials, I'll learn how to add the little bits and bobs it needs to change the US to whatever it needs to be. Or maybe it'd be as simple as just checking the locale set by the system itself. That would probably be even better.
Well, it's Linux. There's probably like 10 different ways to do it.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, maybe we'll do that as a, or maybe just a scripting innards in general, might be kind of fun.
Right.
All command line, all the time.
Yeah, well, that would actually be interesting to see, like, what you did and like how you went about.
I'd love to see a full breakdown of this.
Yeah, me too.
But for the time being, you can go and see the script in its...
I'd love to see you give a full breakdown of this.
Yeah. Tell me to do it. You do it. All right, let's move on.
Okay, next up is the Atari 400 Mini. I saw a review on this today, as a matter of fact, and I added it to the show notes. Now, the reason I like it is because it was the first machine that I learned how to program on in BASIC, original BASIC. So, it's a piece of nostalgia for me. Mine got ruined, but I want this, or I want to 3D print my own. Now, I don't think I would actually use it the way that, as an emulator or anything like that, hooked up to a machine and actually use it, but I want it as a display piece. So because I want it as a display piece, I'm much more likely to 3D print my own, which will save me a lot of money. But I still think it's really cool. I left a link in the show notes. Check out the Atari 400 Mini.
It is cool. Absolutely. All right, so to repurpose an old phone, is that Majid?
Yeah, so this is me, as I was saying, looking into what I can do with old phones, and it came up. It's pretty standard in the sense, you know, use it as a dash cam, use it as a webcam, use it as a security camera, things like that. But it's a good article that's kind of going through the common uses.
Okay. What is the format? Is it a
No, it's just a tech article. That's all it is.
to an article? Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the 8-bit DOE controller that we've been talking about, I posted an Amazon link to that. Actually, they have a new one out that's also on that page that has the Hall Effect joysticks, which is the exact same price as the Alps joysticks one, but will never get, stick drift or anything like that. So if you're going to buy one from Amazon, I highly recommend getting that Hall Effect one. I really like this controller. It has worked with everything that I have tried to set it up on, and it works really well. I haven't noticed any noticeable lag or anything like that, and I've had zero issues with it. I highly recommend it.
Excellent.
All
right.
Okay. As a stupid question, what's the difference between the Alps and the Hall effect?
Okay, Hall Effect is something that is getting a lot of buzz right now over the last like 6-8 months, something like that. I don't know how long, but a lot of people are replacing the joysticks on even their old controllers with Hall Effect joysticks simply because they're magnetic instead of the whole like sliders and gears on the inside sliders and gears on the inside. I can't move my fingers in the right directions at the right time. But that will wear out and break and things like that. So the Hall Effect ones are guaranteed to never get stick drift. And that's what kills most of your controllers is those wearing out and,
We're about done.
them being unusable because whenever they're hooked up, they're trying to go off to the left or off to the right. Right. Instead of potentiometers, it uses magnets. Thanks, Mr. Velcro.
Oh, and then the last one is from me actually. Again, and this is that YouTube channel of the guy doing TV shows, metal covers. Now Stenson. That is one hell of a YouTube rabbit hole. Really is.
Thank you for that link. I did ask for it.
Yeah, to recap, he was doing metal like covers of what kind of songs now?
So TV shows.
TV shows.
So like
okay.
so like like I don't know, Game of Thrones, but then also like a lot of kids programs. So like all the Ben 10s, different Transformers cartoons.
Oh, cool.
SWAT Cats, if you remember SWAT Cats from the 90s. There's loads and loads and loads. As I said, I just sat there just geeking out.
Cool.
Yeah, I've come across several channels like that are doing mashups of the latest one. I can't remember his name, but he does like a song as if it was written by and then like a prominent metal band, and he's pretty fantastic. He also has a sort of messed up left hand, I think. Not sure, but he plays every instrument himself, and it doesn't make a difference. He's adapted to using less than 5 fingers, and it's pretty impressive. So anyway, okay.
I love the cello version of Paint It Black from Wednesday, and it looks like he's got a metal cover of that on there. So
Yes,
I don't know how you can get more metal.
There are so many just creative people on YouTube and elsewhere that come up with really cool stuff. It's a shame it's so hard. There's so much noise now to find these people. So glad we included that. All right, time to move on. And we have housekeeping and announcements. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something that you'd like to hear, let me start that over. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us an email, mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube, post at the mintcast subreddit, chat with us on Telegram and Discord, or post directly at mintcast.org. And there are links to all of these things in the show notes. Next episode, 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, April 28th, 2024. There are links in the show notes to convert that to your time zone. For 435, the next roundtable live stream, 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, April 20th. For 435.5, the next roundtable live stream, 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, May 4th. Jeez, is it going to be May already? Hard to believe. And live stream information is on mintcast.org/livestream. So to wrap up, Joe, how can we get in touch with you?
Well, I'm on a couple other podcasts, some of them with Eric. I'm on the Linux Link Tech Show, which you can catch at tllts.org. I'm also on the Linux Lugcast, which is at linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org. I do try to respond to all of the emails. Or you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi in the show notes.
Moss isn't here, but you can reach him. He reads for Full Circle Weekly News, which is an excellent brief news show. It gets you all your news in 10 minutes or less. He's also on Distro Hoppers Digest, although he's taking a little bit of a break at the moment. You can reach him at bardmoss@pm.me or Mastodon at zavala@hosttux.social. Bill?
Well, you can email me, bill@mintcast.org. I'm Bill_H on Discord. At WCHauser3 @fossadon.org on Mastodon. Also, check out my other two podcasts, Linux OTC and Three Fat Truckers. Links to both of those in the show notes. Majid?
So you can email me directly at drmajid@mintcast.org. I'm on Atypical Doctor 870 on Twitter, but to be fair, I'm not on it really, to be honest. Atypical Doctor on Instagram and Threads, and the Atypical Doctor podcast on Spotify, and also on Linux OTC podcasts.
And you can hear and see me on this and the Linux OTC podcast, as well as Linux Saloon and Linux Lugcast streams, Distro Hoppers Digest. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, I can be reached by email at eric@mintcast.org or numerous other places such as Discord and Telegram, which are linked in the show notes. And before we leave, we'd like to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Someone for our audio editing, usually Bill. Archive.org for hosting our audio files. Hubstar for our logo. InitRD for the animated Discord logo. Londoner for our time syncs and various other contributions. Bill Hauser for hosting the server, which runs our website maintenance, and the Nextcloud server on which we host our show notes and raw audio. He gets to be tech support for all of us knuckleheads. The Linux Mint development team for the fine distro. We love to talk about. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
And company.
Oh, rap.
That's it.